Good afternoon. Welcome to this special meeting of the Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission. It's just past 2 o'clock. Mr. Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bryan,
Here.
Commissioner Gay,
Here.
Commissioner Dewey, myself here, Commissioner Stockdale,
Present.
Commissioner Ellison,
Here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Hunter,
Here.
Commissioner Strange,
Present.
and Commissioner Stewart.
Here.
All right, we have a full house. Mr. Ellison, I believe you have something you'd like to state for the record?
Yes. I acknowledge my absence at the June 7th, 2024 public hearing of the site plan review for the project at 2 Rehoboth Avenue. In accordance with our current amended and restated rules of procedure of the Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission, I now state that I have listened to a recording of that meeting and have reviewed all material considered at that meeting. As a consequence of these actions, I am able to participate fully in the continuing discussion of the site plan review today.
Thank you. The purpose of today's special meeting is the continuation of the public hearing of site plan review application number 1221-05 for the Belhaven Hotel. And my hope is to complete the evidentiary record for this application today, and so that the Planning Commission hopefully would be in a position to consider and deliberate and vote tomorrow. We have a meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock as well. Having said that, I'd like to go then to move the process along today is to start with questions of the Planning Commission of the applicant, building inspector, and Wallace Montgomery, the planning consultant. Open the floor to questions. Mr. Dukes, do you have a question?
No questions. There's a continuation.
Yes,
So
sir.
the question I have is, the public input has been completed, is that correct?
No.
No.
So the public can still speak?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Mr. Strange, are you settled in and ready to go?
I think so, yes, and I apologize.
Do you want somebody else to go first?
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah, you want me to
Go
answer?
ahead.
I'm ready, but I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not ready.
All right.
Okay, Susan Stewart?
I want to focus on the drop-off zone. And I guess the question I have for the applicant is, what's the justification for having the drop-off zone on property you don't own and that city owns?
Yeah, I'm Jeff Zell. I am the developer for the hotel. And so the reason why the request is so that we could actually have people drop their luggage off and move the cars into the garage where they then would be put away. It just asks as a much more efficient operational aspect of it. We will go through the city's procedure to get that drop-off zone.
Mr. Zell, if you would pull that microphone towards you.
I'm
so
sorry.
Later on, if it doesn't pick you up clearly, the tape isn't as useful.
Okay, there we go. I think I had to move Peter's computer. So the point being is we'll go for approval to see if they'll give it to us. If they don't, we'll come up with an alternative way to unload the cars and get people into the building.
So but what you envision is that you'll modify the sidewalk, take spaces, and use that property there as for your private use.
We would ask the city if
City
we
to
could
do
do
that.
that. Yes, and if they don't, we will come up with an alternative situation by pulling the cars into the garage, unloading them, and then telling people to go in from there. But it's typical in a lot of the hotels that we have, and Ben Siddell's here as well, who runs the hotel, that typically we're given some spaces to do that for in most everyone that we own or operate.
But
So-
here in Rehoboth, that's not typical. It's typical to have the
as I
drop-off
said-
zone on the property.
Yeah, as I said, if it's not allowed, we will have an alternative.
Okay, because, for me, it raises serious issues of, there's the obvious issue of the city loses parking revenue.
No,
I know you don't live here, but we have a parking problem in the city.
Right.
That would aggravate that. You've got businesses on both sides that are going to be affected because pedestrians are probably going to seek the other side of the sidewalk. You've got safety issues.
I
And
agree.
I understand. I guess
100%.
I dawned on me in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Who draws a site plan and says, I'm going to build a structure on somebody else's property
right,
as part of their site
right.
plan?
It typically, as I said, we ask the city for permission. If it's not granted, we come up with an alternative. I hear everything you're saying. We're 100%, we're not disagreeing, agreeing. We'll go in front of whoever needs to grant it. If it's not granted, we will not do it.
Okay. And then that would cause you to have to come back here with a new site plan.
No, not necessarily, because we could do it by just pulling the cars in the garage and unloading the cars and taking them into the building and not touching the sidewalk. We just wouldn't do it, right? We have to get permission to do that.
So you would have to do that pretty early on in the process?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
okay,
We'll
right.
know right away, or otherwise,
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, look, as I said, we do this all the time, and Ben's sitting over there, who's going to actually run the hotel. He has numerous, and we're going to do everything that needs to be required by the city, and we'll go through the process. And if it doesn't work, we'll come up with a way for us to operate without it. So that's
Well,
the
and
intent.
that might have implications for other, no, you're just going to pull them into the parking lot.
That's right.
Going to be full. We've already got issues with parking related to how you're going to underpin.
No, we don't.
we don't?
We have it all resolved. I mean, look, this is a very expensive hotel done with very professional people. We're going to make sure this is done to either meet or exceed your expectations and your permitting process and your building inspection group to meet everything. We're not here to cut corners or not do something. There's a lot of people involved in this, including lenders and insurance companies and also the flag, and it's going to be a major hotel flag. There's certain requirements that we have to meet, or they won't let us build it. You won't let us do it if we don't do it correctly, so we're going to do this correctly. That's all I can tell you. We do this all the time, and we've done it almost 300 of them, and we've never had an issue today. I can't think of one. We had one time we weren't given all the spaces because there was a change in how people looked at laybys for drop-off situations. It started to become a big deal, more so today than in the old past, because a lot of people wanted laybys for Ubers now, which we never had 5 years ago. But now all of a sudden we said, can we have like 5 spaces for Ubers to pick people up and drop them? Because nobody wants to get in an Uber in the middle of a street because it could create a problem, especially, So we've had to adjust all that. And so instead of getting 6, we got like 3. And this was in Alexandria, Virginia. And I live in Bethany too, by the way, just so you know, I'm down the street. So I've spent 30 years up here. So I do understand how crowded it is. I do understand the beaches, and I do understand that you guys want it a certain way, and we're gonna do that.
But part of the problem is the answer to most questions is we're going to do it right. And
We're gonna meet your code. We're gonna meet with the building
I think
inspector. and we're
that's
gonna-
laudable, but having a flag and being high-end and all that doesn't really necessarily add to the specific conversation.
The specific conversation is you have a site plan. We've submitted it. We know we have to get it approved. If we don't get it, we'll load from inside the building, and we won't disturb the sidewalk. I mean, I don't know how else I can answer that. I mean, we know we have to go through the process, and we know we have to get it approved. So that's what we're here to do today.
Just a follow-up, can you tell us precisely when you're going to ask the city for this approval?
Can you tell me when we're going to get from here to the next day? I didn't mean to say that facetiously, but as soon as we get out of here and tell us how and what to do, we want to get this thing going. We want to get in front of everybody. We really want to do this. And so it'll be quick. We're not going to mess around. And by the way, the only thing I do have to say, and I'm adding additional flavor here, it's not required for me to do, but there is an issue of when we start it and timing-wise to also make sure that we're not getting into a seasonal issue okay? So, I mean, that's another obvious thing. We're not gonna, start in April or May. Just not a good idea. So those are things that that's why we're a little anxious. We're anxious because there's a point where we miss a window, we're gonna have to wait a little bit. Because it's the smart thing to do. So, I'm sorry. I just threw that in only because it's all part of all this, is how fast we go to get it done.
Mr. Zell, just want to be sure that you understand you're still under oath. The
Yes.
oath that you took at the last meeting.
Yes.
And all your testimony will be true and to the best of your knowledge and belief.
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next, anyone else from this gentleman? Yes, sir.
I think I can,
Okay, all
I think
right.
I'm ready to go now.
Be sure to use your-
Beg your pardon?
be sure to use your microphone.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. If I may, I had written a letter which was in the public documents section that Mr. Forston supplied a series of answers to. And the first question that I posed, and Mr. Forston responded that you're going to get all the required permits, et cetera, that you have to do, and that's given. But I posed that it was really a courtesy notification, since I also constructed a building near the beach and had a permit. The permitting folks are different from the enforcement folks. And in my case, a delay of a week when they came out and stopped construction didn't mean much. In your case, a delay of a week could be dramatic and cost a bloody fortune. So I just point that out, that you may want to talk to the people that do the inspection in addition to the people that do the permitting, because they're two different sets of groups. And that would impact whatever you do, because the natural angle of repose of the sand where you're going to be building, it's going to move.
Yep.
And you have no control over that. So it's really just a courtesy.
No, we absolutely appreciate it, and there's a bunch of people sitting over here from our side as well, and there are project managers, there's engineers. If we don't get this done right in a time frame, it costs the hotel money, it's gonna cost somebody sitting over there some money. Because their job is to make sure this is all covered, and I do appreciate it, but we will definitely do that, and we have engineers that are on that.
Right, good. And my next question, I'm just doing them in sequence at the moment, was on the drop-off zone, which you've addressed. But the way in which Mr. Forson answered it, my question was, over a period of about 8 months, the drop-off zone went from 0 to 5 to 7 to 11. And my question was, even though it says experienced people did this, usually when something like that happens, there's a queuing theory analysis that was done based on the number of stations you have available to check people in, check out, et cetera. And I saw nothing that justified anything. It just, the number kept getting bigger, and there was no apparent justification. And
Well-
there still isn't, basically.
Yeah,
And I was looking for those mathematics.
Yeah, I mean, when we design these, we, with all good intent, we're really at the mercy of the community that's gonna grant us the right for the drop-off zones. So for us to do a calculation and say, I know I want 15 of them, we know we're not gonna get 15. What we'd like as many as we can get, because we think it helps the hotel, but we also are realistic that it costs the city money. They're not gonna give it to us. There's issues of safety that we have to manage. And so we actually do it the other way around. We don't do the calculation of internal use. We know we need them, and we'd like to have them. But as I said, I've done a few hotels, and Ben has done some as well, I know, where we've done the loading and unloading interiorly, because they'd come in and then they'd enter from a lobby from the garage and up into the building. We have to do it, we do it. It went up because we were just looking at the lay-by, and remember, we reduced the number of rooms, and we also created the vision. We're listening to you, and as we're doing this, I'm trying not to change your plans so that everybody comes back and says, you submitted a new plan, we have to start over. We don't want to start over. Right. We're trying to finish this, and so we will listen to whatever the city will tell us, and we will adjust from the building inspector side, whatever he deems. When we give it to him and he sees it, we'll go there. But, I could tell you, we'd like 6 or 8, maybe 10, and that's how it got on the plan. Because I probably said, hey, we can ask for whatever we can get, and we know we're gonna end up maybe with 3 or 4, at most.
All right, well, that's what engendered my question is I used to teach this stuff, and I looked at it and said, wait a minute, where's the justification? And I didn't see it.
Yeah, well, 0 doesn't
So now I
usually work.
understand the logic that was used.
Well, it's a technique of how we're gonna operate this hotel. We just changed the operation, and we will do it that way if we have to.
Because as my fellow commissioner pointed out, this may in fact be a road abandonment issue, which creates a whole list of issues to be dealt with.
We agree.
So, My third question was on the truck height entrance dimensions that I raised a year ago. And Mr. Forson had indicated at one point it was going to be changed, and then in the last notation, he indicated that it's going back to where it originally was. And that creates problems, which we'll get to eventually, from the standpoint of the height of trucks that can enter, especially under two circumstances. One is if it's a trash truck or it's a regular truck, and/or whether or not you're going to have a mechanical door that shuts down that entrance to the loading dock area. And if it does, then it reduces the height even further, and a truck can't get in
Yeah.
based on standard dimensions.
Chances are we are not going to have something that comes down, it'll be open, number one. Number two, we have dealt with moving trash out of some of the most difficult places in the world, and we will, if that means us even acquiring a trash company to acquire a piece of equipment, we've been known to do that, and we may have to pull it and have certain rollers on it to pull it out to do it, we'll do it. But we think, from what we've been told, and again, operationally, that goes to Ben, who's sitting over there, we can talk to him, but he feels that the 12 feet is fine and that we could make that work, but there won't be any door. We're not going to
Okay.
cover the door.
So it'll be 12-foot clear.
Yeah.
That's good.
We can always deflate the tires like they do on the beach.
This one actually, it got to be, it's been brought up before, it got very complex, and there was disagreement in several instances.
Yeah.
The loading dock will accommodate the truck in terms of height,
Yeah.
but there's no maneuvering room on site. And Mr. Forson's response when I raised that, the code requires two things, a loading dock and maneuvering room on your site. The response given was the maneuvering, well, there is no maneuvering, but it'll occur on the street. That's the whole point of the code. It can't occur on the street. When you have a building of this size and a magnitude, the maneuvering room has to occur within your property, on your property, which is how the code
Yeah.
reads. And that you don't have.
Well, we've done buildings with exactly what you're talking about, maneuvering underneath, and usually those are very large projects where we have 6 to 8 bays, and we can accommodate an equivalent amount of trucks, and we have to maneuver them in and out. The anticipation here is that we're just going to back it in, period. You know, they're going to go back straight in. To have maneuverability on the inside, it takes out half the garage, candidly. I mean, that's, if you're talking about pulling a semi around in a position to create that, these parking garages, as everybody's aware, are just not that big in the sense we had to make every car count and make them fit. So it's a straight pull in. It'd go past, back right in. That's the intent. Now, I'm hoping that these are short bed trucks. Again, Ben's here if you want to tell him. Most of this is local deliveries. This is not a manufacturing plant. This is, we're going to be getting people dropping linens. We're going to get people dropping food. Most of those trucks usually are the 20 to 30 foot range, and they're, 1.5, 2 times a car, maybe a little more. That's how we planned on doing it.
Well, I agree with that logic, but there's two things. One is, if you look at the delivery of vehicles right now that occur in Rehoboth to hotels and to other organizations, they may be structured differently. A lot of it's LTL, and the vehicles that come in are in fact much larger than what you just described. But the other issue is, it's just a matter of code, and it may in fact, if that's what you wish to do, you may have to get a variance, and that may be very possible, because if you're limiting the size of these vehicles and it's under your control, our code indicates that you need two things, even if it's a small truck. You need the loading dock and A&D maneuverability on the property, not in the street. So it's a matter of how the code is structured. And it is what it is. So what you're saying sounds extremely logical and good sense and good planning, but the code doesn't indicate that.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but, yeah, I'm sorry, Richard.
Well, to my way of thinking, and obviously, reasonable minds can disagree.
Microphone.
I'm sorry. Richard Forston. To my way of thinking, and obviously reasonable minds can disagree, whether you pull in front, like the nose of the truck pulls in frontward, and then has to back out, or you back in and then pull out straight, there's no, what's the maneuvering? right? I mean, I have to enter the property. This isn't a case where I've got a loading dock and I've got to pull in and then I've got to turn the wheel and then I've got to turn the wheel again and get lined up with something. I mean, there are instances on large properties where sometimes that has to occur, but here I'm just backing in. And so there isn't a need for these fixed trucks to do any maneuvering when you're backing right up to the loading dock. We've designed it that way so that we don't have to have maneuvering.
And that's what I'm getting at is the code says otherwise. It may, in fact, a variance may solve this. But even to singular maneuver, in order to do what you just described, the vehicle's coming in on the right-hand side of the road. And in order to maneuver to get into that position, it makes a semi-K-turn into the left-hand side, which is the road exiting, moves back in, and then backs in. Because the truck backs in because, in fact, the loading, most of it, unloading is going to occur at the tailgate area.
Yeah, Commissioner Strange, the other thing that there is a maneuverability to it. It's just may not be what we all like. But the fact is we enter into a 20-foot opening, and there's 24 behind the opening. So once we get in, we are able to angle that truck differently once it's inside the door parameter. Because that's
24 foot is on the entrance to the parking garage.
to the parking garage. But I'm saying we may be able to utilize part of that.
Okay, so it's different than what the current physical plan shows.
Correct. Well, again, we're going to find out. First of all, I really don't want to have a lot of very large trucks pulling in here. And I think that's been very well known to our operator side. I mean, we're talking stuff that's, and if they get there, they better get there when there's not a whole lot of people there. And again, we're trying to run a first class. We need to keep this clear, like you're saying. We don't want truck traffic all over the place either. That just doesn't help us.
Right, so.
And it's in the same side of our entry point.
Right.
So, I mean, it just isn't a good look to have tractor trailers at your lobby door.
That's right, absolutely correct. But what you're indicating, which makes absolute perfect sense, at the current time doesn't match with the actual plan that's been submitted. So if you're making changes and it doesn't require a variance because you've made physical changes that are acceptable within the code, that plan has to be seen and voted on what the real plan is, not the hypothetical plan.
Yeah, I mean, we're okay with this plan. If we can get it done, this is what we want to do. I think this is all part of us going back and whether we have the drop-off zones and how we do everything. You have the plan we'd like.
Right, and as I'm pointing out, there's issues that it can't be done as stated because as presented, it would violate the code.
No, I understand, and we won't do it to violate. I got it.
Yeah, because the idea is to try to find out how to say yes, not how to say no, but it has to be according to the
Oh,
code.
I agree. I mean, the whole purpose of this is for all of us to do this right and that we don't create a problem.
Can I continue with this? Please do. Okay. Yeah, I've got, I'm actually following the list that Mr. Forson responded to that I have. Retail unit specifications. And Mr. Forson responded to warm lit shells. And this may be a fine point, but again, I wanted to indicate it, that you only have to describe the rooms. But the rooms, if it's a room and there's things that are absent that would be classified as a room, for example, none of the rooms that you have right now, that when I say the retail area, not the physical rooms upstairs.
Yeah.
None of them show bathrooms,
Yes.
which are rooms. And none of your shells show that particular form of room.
Yeah.
It's just a knit, but it's not there.
we
It
don't-
can move around, it can do anything, but right now it's saying that there will be no facilities of that nature in those rooms on the first floor, which doesn't seem to make much sense.
I think what happens, if we put bathrooms in every bay, it's not going to be what's going to happen because people may take 2 bays, 3 bays, or maybe a restaurant. We may gang the bathrooms on one of the bays and the other 3 bays don't have bathrooms. So what we do is typically run all the mechanicals in an area where we think we're going to put them, and then we tap them in as we need them. As I said, we're not going to do anything beyond 15,000. It's going to be less. I find it's going to be, I think they're going to be a lot smaller across the board. But for us to put bathrooms in spaces that may not need them doesn't make sense either. So what we do is we'll show you plumbing as it relates to when we go to the building, and then we'll tap them where we need them. And, if you go to restaurants, you'll see where they'll have one area for almost 8,000, 6,000 feet, whatever it is, and it may not even be a restaurant. Remember, some of these spaces may not, may be small enough, depending on code. If code needs it, we'll put in the bathroom. But some of these maybe just be display, selling stuff right through a window, right?
And it was really pointed out more so as, for your own protection, that a room, in terms of how a room is
No,
defined.
I get it.
So,
No, I appreciate, but I think
your
we
engineering
we
analysis is
agree
going
with you.
on.
We just don't show, it's in the slab, it'll be there. But we don't show a toilet, because then you're gonna come back and say move the toilet, and it's not gonna be right.
One other point, and again, I mean, we're in the bowels of the code here, but you cited a particular section of the code, and that code says you have to show the approximate location and size of all existing and or proposed sanitary and storm sewers, water mains, stormwater structures, et cetera. It doesn't say rooms in that section, so I didn't mention rooms in my answer. It's because the
Because that's
section
what
of
you
the
were referring
code you
to.
cited didn't refer to rooms.
I wasn't referring to that, but that's okay, and the answer is credible and okay.
Yeah, we're gonna get there.
Okay. FEMA, Lomar, and flood issues, and that was quite extensive in what I was noting, is that in several of the standards that relate to IBC and NFPA standards, and the location of potential exits and the distance with regard to the loading that occurs in the parking lot, you may, in fact, require an additional exit at the far end, the closed end in of it, which then affects the number of spaces you have, which then affects,
Yeah.
It just cascades. But nonetheless, it needs to be identified so that the plan that we approve, in fact, reflects the final construction of what the building is going to be.
Yeah, and I think we gave you what it's gonna be. You're asking for, and I looked at your calculations, and, to have minivans strewn all over down there with 6 people in them to create candidly, we've done these, we've never had anybody look at it that way. And what happens is they take an average of how many people will be there and what times they leave, because there's peak times in, there's peak times out, and we manage that. And we do it, and Ben, again, going back to Ben sitting there, they're valet, if we do that and we bring the cars up to a level for people to get in and leave, we know where to put the cars at what time and when, and we just hope there's not 100 minivans. I thought that was great, by the way. But that's a huge amount of people. I don't disagree with you. But I think anybody building and looking at and managing this, we're not going to get close to that. I mean, I think we did a pretty good job at giving you, we definitely have enough to service this hotel. If it's decided we may need another one because somebody comes in and says, oh, because of what we're doing, we'll take it under consideration. But I don't really think we need it.
Well, forgive me, I am an engineer as well.
Yeah.
And this gets back again to queuing analysis and arrival times and departure times and the calculation and the average loading within the vehicle.
Yep.
And when it comes to the safety side of the house, generally what's done is it may not necessarily be the maximum because the statistics show it's highly, highly improbable. But if something shows up and when you look at the distribution and the scarcity of the data and it turns out to be, on 4th of July weekend, it may not be minivans, but it may be smaller vehicles and there'll be 6 people packed in there, or possibly even 7
Yes.
because they're small children. The bottom line is the head count ends up being that you marginally need it.
Yes.
And so that's the kind of data I was looking for, which was missing and not provided and not there.
The point being, this is typically what we present to building inspectors. They look at it and they make a reasonable assumption. Remember, we're insured. We have to make sure that it works. We're not going to risk endangerment of people here, so we agree. And if in fact there are a lot of people, and it seems like this is, and we don't have an extra exit, it's going to have to be managed by the hotel operator. And we'll come up with a solution to it because we can't afford to have the issue, just like you said. We err to safety. The problem with putting it in is if we lose parking spaces, then you have to have stairwell. This thing, it spirals, right? So, but what we think we provided works. And we have structural engineers and we have, for traffic engineers, everybody's looked at this and said it's okay. Again, It'll go through your building inspection department, and if they have heartburn over it, we'll see what we can come up with. And it may be just, you know, a lot of these things are solved through operational management agreements. We call them master agreements for the building, where it has to be run a certain way to make sure, A, that we get proper insurance at a reasonable cost, and B, that we're not risking anybody any harm to the property. I mean, that's number one. This is a very big asset. And by the way, there are standards that everybody should be aware of that we're going to have a national operator. We have a signed agreement with one. They too are party to all this stuff, and they too do not want to have an issue with people suing them because they have a lot of money. So they give us standards that we too have to meet. And again, Ben has coordinated with Peter a lot of the standards necessary to get this done, where they approve what we're doing as well.
Right. Just as a point, not related to how many people are in the car.
Sure.
It appears that the nearest exit is right at the borderline of the 175 feet.
Yeah.
And that in itself may be problematic, irrespective of the number of personage that come in.
Yeah, we'll talk to your building inspection. If we're at 175, it needs to be 173 or whatever, or 170, but I think we're on it, but okay.
Yeah,
I mean, it's close. I don't disagree that sometimes our requirements to meet them are very close to what's permissible and what isn't. But I do want to say that it's inside, but it's close. Okay, it's inside but close.
That's one of the issues. I'm going to keep going in the other areas. Okay. The other is in the solar panel batteries.
Yeah.
And in that particular, I'm not going to read the entire question. Mr. Forston has it. I
Yeah.
assume you've probably looked at it.
Yeah.
In terms of the amount of power that's going to be generated by these, if in fact they're installed, gets into, plus or minus 1,300 amps, which is not particularly negligible. And the response was there will be no solar panel battery bank at this facility, which seems like a very illogical answer, because if you've got a solar power battery bank, the generation of the power has to go somewhere, and it's that power is going to be generally between 25 and 45 volts.
Yeah.
So in order to make use of that, it's converted into something, and it has to be stored somewhere or placed somewhere, or if you're going to go through a conversion system, it gets complex.
Yeah.
And if you're generating that real time, there's a battery bank somewhere. And
Well, some of the equipment, and just so you know, because we've done these on, some of them have banks and some of them do not have banks. They're kind of part of the system itself, so they don't call them banks. It's unfortunate, but that's how they do it. They're usually not as good as what you're talking. To have a bank is good. We're not really looking at this as a major source of power as it relates to it. And candidly, if it gets overly cumbersome and the city doesn't want it, we'll pull it. We don't need them. But we were using the battery packs within the solar reflectors themselves, and we're only using it in the mechanical room. We're trying to do a direct transfer where it's going. It's not being held and sent through the building. We were going to use it in the mechanical system, for the mechanical units on the roof. That's really where it was going. But candidly, we'll develop through this as we continue looking at this. And again, we'll go through the building inspection office and make sure if it is done, Commissioner Strange will make sure it's done right, and that the fireproofing and everything necessary that you're talking about, if we go that way, and I don't think we're going that way.
Okay, well, because there's some follow-on
I think
questions.
I think it's going to be a very, unfortunately, inexpensive system that we were just trying to try and reduce some of the loads, but not a lot of them, and it's not going to carry anything.
Okay, because there was other questions that related to the solar panels. In fact, the way they're listed, they really are not under the definition within the code of heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. There are
Well,
secondary.
we were using it to power that. Okay, so again, that's an interpretation. Again, if this gets too complicated, okay, we don't need to be doing this. We just thought it would work for everybody, and it would look kind of, and it's the right thing to do, but we're not like wedded to it.
Right, okay, because that in turn led to some other follow-on issues because they existed. One was the railings on the roof, which Mr. Forstner responded that it was to protect people from falling off the roof.
Yeah.
But, oh, I'm sorry. But those particular railings are located in the center of the roof, so they don't prevent anybody from falling off it. It prevents people from falling on it, which doesn't make any sense and really are not required because the only people allowed on the roof are professionals working on the equipment.
Yeah.
So it's-
I would agree with you, but I got to tell you something because I've almost fallen off a roof a couple times myself, unfortunately, and blown from the center of a roof to the edge. Bad day. But the railings don't have to be on the edge to protect people. They need to keep people from getting close to the edge, whatever that means, right? Peter put them there. If we can adjust them to make them more appropriate. The problem is the further you push them out, A, they get closer to the edge of the building. B, you can see them more. I
Well,
think,
you've got a tactical problem in terms of height because it really isn't part of although you're attributing it to be part of the HVAC system, they are freestanding entities.
yeah, but
that are not part
I
of the
got to tell you
HVAC
something. I
system.
build buildings all over the country. If we didn't have railings around our HVAC equipment when people went out to service them, we'd have a big problem because there's bad things that happen on roofs.
Oh, I know.
And not only that, I will put it in here, we're on the beach, and you're going to get high wind conditions coming off the water. And I got to tell you something, you're going to get gusts of 30. You have them now. Can you imagine being at the top of this building and not having a railing going to the mechanical? So we'll work with the building inspection group. I hear you, but I think we need some sort of a guard system up there, and we'll come up with something that hopefully everybody will agree to works. But we thought this worked, and we are concerned.
Yeah, I think there are alternatives.
Okay.
When somebody's working on the roof. As a former firefighter, I've
Yeah,
been in
you can latch
situations-
on, but I've seen those now. Okay, we can go on and on, but I get your point, and I think you get we're going to work. We don't want to hurt anybody.
Right.
Over a couple feet of
Right.
where the things
Now,
go.
along the same lines.
Yeah, no, I get you. Go
Was
ahead.
the planters on the roof.
Yeah.
The planters are just that. They are not part of the power, they are not HVAC, and they violate the height requirements. So,
Yeah, we've been putting those up, just so you know, for stormwater issues, retention, and we use them for green roofs. We've been putting them on a lot. Peter puts them on a lot of his buildings, and they work, they're beautiful. We use them to grow stuff, but it also handles some of the stormwater drain that comes off the roofs when you get hit with a rainstorm. These things, believe it or not, actually can hold a lot of water for that. And all we're asking for it to do is to hold it for a very short period of time to allow the system to not drop all the stormwater. So but I hear you. You're,
As
and
a
again, we're
technical
not
matter-
wedded to it. It's a best practices thing that we do. That's really all that is.
well, in fact, that it may very well be valid, and that may be the case. Unfortunately, it violates the building code, which you can alleviate if you feel
We'll
it's.
we'll find
to
out.
get a
As I said,
variance.
we're not bought into it. We thought it was a good idea to manage runoff from the roof. And if we don't do it, it's okay too, but we'll talk about it and see if it works.
The actual solar panels themselves, the way they're depicted in the drawing of record, are actually at an angle, and it turns out they end up violating the building code height that you're
Okay.
allowed to do. Now, the counter argument was, well, they're part of the HVAC system.
Right.
It's pushing the definition of HVAC within our code. Now, again, you can get a variance to do it, but if you don't get a variance to do it, it doesn't meet code.
As I said, we're not wed to those either. That was, again, because it breaks down spiking of power. It actually helps the units. We weren't storing, we weren't doing, this just helps save. It's the right thing to do to not waste energy. It cuts down on peak loads. You know all the stuff that it does. So we did it because of that. If it's the wrong angle or we can save it, we'll work with everybody here to see if it works. If it doesn't, they're gone.
Right. But again,
But we'll try.
when you get to that point, it may in fact require a
Yeah,
variance.
and so we interpret it as helping the mechanical system on the roof to being part of the system because that's where the power was going.
I mean, some of these things may be very nice to haves, and that's the reason for variances, is to take into account something that wouldn't, is outside the code but is desirable. So
And you're
you shouldn't
pointing
rule
it
that
out, and we're going to make a list, and we'll come back and deal with it. Right? And if we don't get them, we keep going because, as I said, these are all nice to haves.
Right.
You're right, it's a nice to have
Nice.
list.
Right. The next one, and this may be how I interpreted the drawing, and it may not be the case, was the mechanical enclosures over the HVAC equipment. Some of it is shown as being roofed. We're not talking about the elevator or the access to it. But the actual enclosures were there were roofs on the enclosures of the HVAC. And if there's a roof on the enclosure on the HVAC, that means that the roof is actually a floor. Now you're totally non-code compliant.
Right.
And you can't do that. So the question is, did I misinterpret the drawing?
Yeah,
Or does the
I don't
current
think
drawing show
they're
roofs?
open, right? Are they open, Peter? You're getting into details, and now I'm starting to decide if I've lost my mind. So, okay, I'd rather ask the guy that drew it. So, go ahead, Peter.
Where there's roofs shown, it's where the roofs are shown, it's over the elevator. Where there are no roofs, it's over the mechanical system.
But the other parts of that in the HVAC area, which isn't near the elevator, they appear to be roofs. That's the question I was asking about.
They're not roofs, they're open.
All right, even though you don't see it, they appear to be a roof. It may
You're
just be
looking at the
optics.
lower roof, there's a wall around it, so there's a lower roof. So you're still seeing a roof, but it's the lower roof.
Right, it didn't look that way at all.
Okay,
That
well,
was my question.
That's the way it is.
Good, so I'm glad we got that straightened out.
I'll get him to draw it better next time, so.
You already answered the question on solar panels and the mechanical enclosures that I just talked about.
Just,
the other was-
can I ask a question? Are we entering all these answers to record too that we
Yes.
sent? Okay,
Well, that happened,
good,
right.
because sometimes I leave things out. So, thank you.
Okay, this is just, again, a technical issue based on the code. The code requires that the HVAC systems, you actually have to know for approval the actual physical dimensions of the equipment you're putting in, which now are not reflected at all.
Right.
So you're probably, I mean, I'm sure you know what they are. It's just they're not reflected on the drawing. They're just shown as typicals. But for the next step,
Yeah,
They
and
can't be
the reason why, just, you're 100% correct. And we know what we think we're going to get, but here's the issue. If you know what they are, and we know what they are, so does the guy that's selling them to me. And there is variation, slight variation in different sizes and different configurations, and we'd like not to have to do that until as quickly as the next step, because it has to do with availability. And the problem that we have right now is we don't know when we get out of here, whether it's approved or not, and then we go to the next step. And if I come back 8 months, 10 months from now, what I thought we could buy may not be here anymore. Or they may technologically change the configuration of it, and they may upgrade it for a different SAR and a different basis, as you know. And so we're hoping that this is what it is. So for us to be specific would be very hard.
right, but you could,
That's why we said it's typical.
right, because of the code requirement that it has to be actual, even though you may put in a smaller piece of gear, you can still dimension the maximum one as long as it fits. And looking at the drawing, it looks like that could be accommodated.
Yeah, okay, we'll take a look at that. But again, I don't want to tell you one thing and then you say, Jeff, I came back and these are different than you said. And some of it may be due to what's available.
Okay. The others with regard to the standards, and even within the plat, which reflects a whole bunch of goodies
Yeah.
that this thing has to apply to. There were several standards that apply to the type of this building is under the American Society of Civil Engineering and ASTM standards that were never called out. And because this is a hotel located on the edge of the continent, and as you pointed out, a lot of bad things can happen in terms of wind loading, there's no way to know what the design standard is that you have used, and it's not called out at all. And that's an essential element, because that in itself, as you pointed out, that has a dramatic effect on the structural design, physically and dimensionally.
Yeah. Our engineers, our structural engineers understand what they're designing to and how it's being done, and we'll call it out to make sure you have what you need.
Okay, so that's coming, that's good. The other is, and I didn't know who does this, quite frankly, is the maximum safe number of people per room designation. There's one which is under the International Building Code, which strictly relates to structural strength, and that isn't the issue. The issue is what's the maximum number of people that can be in each room, the ballroom, the potential restaurant areas, or the retail areas. from the standpoint of the fire code, the fire marshal, and the city requirements. So my question is, because I did not know the answer, and I can't ask it until I'm in this public forum, and I'll address this to Matt, who makes that determination?
So that comes from both the life safety code and our building codes. So there's charts and everything that depict the maximum allowable people in each building and the different situations where those people
Within
are
each room.
presented. That's right.
Okay, so that's yet to come.
That's right. That's usually during the construction document phase.
Yeah, and Commissioner Strange, typically on these, each room will have a plaque with occupancy levels on them, including the rooms, so.
Yeah, that's where I was heading.
Yeah,
because
it'll all be identified, yes.
Reviewing it, there was no way to know
Yes,
that.
and we are going to maintain that standard very strictly. We don't want more people in rooms that aren't supposed to be in the rooms. So this, again, this is about operating, but it'll be posted.
Right. Now, the other was just a question because I couldn't tell the rooftop enclosures with regard to the elevator, and I really asked what type of elevator it was because I couldn't tell from.
I
which
think
one
we
you
have
were
a
doing.
track 2 right now,
That's
traction
what
2?
was indicated, yeah.
Yeah, that's what, yeah. The Gen 2 traction elevators is what we're looking at. But again, this goes back to when we get there, let's see what's there. That's
Right,
what we're
and-
hoping and we're doing.
Okay, and that's fine. Okay, the traction elevators, that's fine. The dedicated smoke control system, and this was one of looking at the diagram. In the original plan was the color code that was
Yeah.
used described it as one thing, and then in the plan it described it as something else. And I was trying to figure out what the structure was on the floors that was identified as smoke control system. Didn't seem to be that. So my question is here on the individual floors, because it appeared to be things that had doors and gates. And yet below, that was the smoke control system. So I raised that question again. It wasn't at all clear from the drawings. What are these things?
Yeah, Peter, do you want to? Because typically I'll answer it and he can tell me if I'm right. Typically, we get to the point where the fire marshals, we design a complete smoke control system for the entire building. All the rooms, the kitchen, which has special additional
Right.
items that are not typical of the rest of the building. And then we have a control panel, fire control panel that includes the smoke, fire, and everything else, usually at the front lobby entry point area so that the fire people can see, what zone. So it'll be zoned off, right? So they can see where it is in the building and what level it is, so they can go directly to that. So that'll be in the lobby.
Right, but the physicality of the smoke evacuation system involves sheet metal work, essentially.
Yeah.
In addition to the control systems.
That's correct.
And this only showed something that it didn't look to be that in one corner, in one place, and didn't go anywhere else. So I was just questioning what the heck was going
The
on.
bottom line is it will be an elaborate smoke control system. It will be done on a floor-by-floor and an area basis, and the building inspecting people will tell us, and the fire marshal, who hopefully doesn't change his mind too many times, exactly what they require to give us an occupancy permit.
Right, and that.
So that'll be done.
Right, and that physicality is what, the plan that we approve
Yeah.
has to reflect that, because
Yeah.
otherwise we're making a plan that
Yeah.
that is based on nothing.
But I will also tell you that the fire marshal, as you know, will come in and walk the facility, and based on certain elements, may change certain things, and it's always subject to it being altered until the final permit is given. I think when we get it approved at this end, we all believe and know that we have one more hurdle to go through, and that is the actual physical approval of the fire marshals at the very end. Because it also has to do with furniture, location of it, combustibility of it. There's a lot of stuff that goes into
yeah.
what they decide to do it. But we will do it right, for sure. And your building inspection group will be involved, so will the fire marshals.
Okay. The next question was on maintenance and/or construction and air rights. And Mr. Forstner responded that no, none of it's needed. And that construction can be performed without such agreements.
Yeah.
Based on the documentation we received with regard to the technique that's going to be employed with the original sealed engineering document with regard to this,
Yeah.
it says the implications of it are that you in fact do need that. Because, my question was, I wanted to know, and I looked at the drawings, the one particularly that affronts the property that is Go Fish, I couldn't tell from the drawings with regard to the other property that abuts Mr. Trejo's.
Yeah.
But it appeared that if in fact you do it and you take it to the limit, which is what's been presented, that you're going to the absolute maximum of the property will actually be 0 inches from the adjacent building, 2-story plus building. And with the building as designed, with the rights that you need to build it, referring back to the Hillis-Carnes report of 2.5 years ago, what's dimensionally required can't be done unless, a couple of things, you get permission from those 2 property owners to do what you want to do, or in fact, the building has to be literally smaller to some degree to put in the foundations. Because whether you select direct or indirect underpinning or other techniques, which I had assumed another technique when you're doing a 2-story garage, now you're building a 1-story, so
Right.
that allows you to do something differently, you're still left with that dilemma.
Well, I think, let me go back to, I don't know if you were here, Commissioner Strange, when we kind of presented alternatives. What happened was that our structural engineer had designed this, like in a lot of cities, but not here, so we found that out, allow tieback agreements that are mandatory to
Right.
protect everybody, both buildings, and most major cities in the United States have tieback agreements. And those are done, you don't need permission. The city actually signs off on them with the structural, and whether you like it or not, adjoining or not adjoining, they do it. So our structural engineer assumed that Rehoboth had one for a moment and then realized it didn't. So that's why it was designed the way you saw it. And then about, I guess, 4 or 5 meetings ago, we challenged everybody, our structural people and everybody, saying, okay, there are no tiebacks. Can we do this without getting on the other property to do it? And the answer is yes. There are 2 or 3 other types of means, methods, and excavation and there's high-intensity concrete, that we can drop in here. Now, these are not cheap items.
Yep.
But there is always, where there's a will, there's a way. It can be done, and it's specialized equipment, and we found them here. There's people that'll do it, and we're looking, and we've talked to them, and they can get it done, where we've shrunk back the walls again. We're using high-intensity concrete, and they use a machine that doesn't need to get beyond. They can take it to as close as we want and get it done. Takes a little longer, and we have to be a lot more careful. And our construction guys told us it can be done. So that happened, I think, over the last 4 or 5 meetings. I think we got to that point when we realized you didn't have tieback agreements.
Right,
So they're going to be probably almost the same thickness. We did take a floor out from under us, right? And we were able to design it where the shear walls, the walls themselves are thinner and can support this building.
right,
So-
and the high-strength concrete, I think, in the last time, in just an informational way, it wasn't, it wasn't cast in concrete. I
Right.
shouldn't make that observation.
That was a good joke.
But it appeared to be that using a different grade of structural concrete and the rebar involved, that you could get that down to 8 inches.
That's right.
And I assume that's the assumption you're
Yeah,
making.
probably 6 to 8 inches, yeah.
Right. The question is, though, what is the fill on the opposite side that abuts the other property? In this case, the Go Fish.
Well, they will end up with the wall on the other side because obviously it hardens, right? And the reality behind it is we want to make sure that what we leave behind doesn't flux and move. It has to be solid and hold back. And what will typically happen is if we did the tiebacks, people would tie into our tiebacks and they would do whatever they want and they would adjoin us. This one, they're going to have to marry our wall with their wall. So that's what's going to happen. And it's a little more complicated for them as well, but it should not affect, again, we'll do it where it can be done. It's just more money for everybody.
Now, in the original report, which is the only official report that was sealed by the engineer, the Hillis-Carnes report, is that company report to your organization, or is that independent?
Yeah, Hills Carnes no, we have Tadrick Cohen, right? That's doing it. Is that Peter? Geotech is Hills Carnes, and then the structural is Tadrick Cohen.
Okay, but the reason I'm indicating that, in there, they explicitly state that you need approximately 12 inches of a particular type of fill on the opposite side of the wall.
Now, it's, again, as I said, we're changing the technique on getting this done, I guess. And
But that is the only officially sealed document that currently exists.
Okay.
And since that's the only official
Okay.
document that exists, we have to have a document that reflects exactly what you're talking about explicitly. Because under either scenario, in fact, based on the last engineer's presentation, who made the material error, and that was in April, and when he spoke and said that, he said two things that one was absolutely correct, the other was absolutely wrong. The first was, he said, if you don't allow underpinning, the other two foundations will collapse, and that was true. The second statement he made, that you have to allow underpinning, he did not realize, and he was making a statement that didn't apply to the state of Delaware.
Yeah, no, we know that.
The fact that this underpinning is done in other areas, and that I've looked at all the codes as well, those are in localities which want large buildings and have skyscrapers. And this community with our CDP has said just the opposite. Now, the current structure, because a variance was issued, is perfectly acceptable.
Right.
And it's the height, whatever it is going to be. But since you couldn't do underpinning, as you pointed out, you have to make some changes technically. But with the information that was presented that I looked at, and I wasn't at the May meeting due to a medical emergency,
Right.
the diagrams that were shown using the 8-inch thick reinforced concrete still resulted in the physicality of the building that you were about to build. Reflecting those dimensions ends up that you lose several inches on each side internally in the building. And although Mr. Falat is totally within his right to build everything or to lay things out to the maximum that he can do, in this case, when you lose those few inches, your parking garage is non-compliant, which means you're going to lose a bunch of spaces. And that's not reflected. And that needs an analysis by your team, engineering team.
I disagree with that, and I also will tell you that there's been an additional way to do this that wasn't presented even at that meeting that is being looked at. And that amount of inches will not make all this non-compliant. A couple inches will not. And I think, if we need to get around the show to, we will. And again, we can work with the building inspection to make sure that we're in compliant and show you what it is. We're more than happy to do that. But I think this has evolved as we kept looking at it. And by the way, so just for everybody to remember, the below grade element of this building is pretty much almost there already. There is a basement area on this site, right? So we are not going that much further below, number one. And number two, this is, and far from me, this is not a skyscraper by any means. This is like 4 or 5 stories. This is not Scott and I are now building a 30-story apartment building right now. That's a whole different level of technique. This is what we consider pretty much a low rise.
Right.
And the materials. Now, we chose to do higher value materials on this hotel than what is typical of what's here. A lot of this would have been what we'll call, it would have been 3/2. It'd be concrete with 3/, and the 3/, would be in wood frame, right? And it would have to meet code relative to a hotel, and we'd do that. It may have to be 3 with metal stud, but it's lightweight construction, straight across the board. This is not heavyweight construction. The loads we're carrying here are not a whole lot, candidly, compared to what and you would agree. This is like a 4-story garden apartment complex. That's how we look at this thing. So it's lightweight construction, and we will give to Matt Janis and the building whatever's necessary to prove that A, we didn't lose the parking spots that you say, and B, give you the technique that we will use. And we have a solution or we wouldn't be standing here, but it has evolved. So in your defense, I agree this thing has changed. and we will make sure everybody's aware of it.
Right, and all I have to work with is what's been given to me.
Yeah,
And what's been
but,
given to me.
it's going to look pretty, I think it's almost virtually similar is what you end up with. Not in the tie-back side of being in somebody else's property, but on the property line in, the actual footprint that you're going to get the footprint.
Okay,
You're going to get the footprint. And the cost to us is going to be a lot of money, but we're going to do it.
okay. And that was really
But I do understand.
Yeah,
I mean,
because
I get where you're going.
what we had to review and went to look
Yep.
at isn't what you're saying now, which is obviously makes it
No,
problematic.
we had to, we changed, as I said, you weren't here probably, and we had to, it was an unknown concept of the tiebacks of the city.
Okay,
That's how this all started, and then we had to go and redo it. But we do have the engineers on it, and they have come up with a way to execute.
okay. That's fine, and if we get to see that, that's
Yep.
terrific, and I know Matt will share that with us. Wow, okay. The other was a general question.
I have a question, Mike,
Yeah.
Mr. Zell.
Yes.
So are you saying that the site plan we're looking at will change?
I don't think so.
Okay, so this new thing you've come up with, which has not been articulated, won't cause any change to the plan?
It should be the
We're
same.
still looking at
Yeah,
the
it's
May 24th.
still same footprint, the same layout, the same everything. It's just the means and methods to deliver those walls will be different. It's just we'll use a different construction technique. But you end up with the same frame, the same footprint, the same everything.
Okay. And
That's
you,
what-
and you'll get a new engineering
Oh, yeah,
analysis
wait,
for
yeah.
whatever.
We're already working on all that, yeah.
That's the issue that, that comes down to, you said the exact same footprint. That's where we're getting into really technical details that we have sufficient, that I have, and I think everyone else has, insufficient technical detail in order to agree with what you just said.
I understand,
And
but
that's the problem.
we're giving you the site plan that we're going to execute on. We're giving you all the information. Typically, a lot of this is worked out, at least, and I don't know how you guys do it, but usually at the building inspector's level and the permit, and how we execute. And by the way, with all due respect, I hope there's always change. I mean, I hate to say this to you, but we're going to get to a point in looking at this, and somebody's going to say, this doesn't work here right now for whatever. Maybe it's some geotechnical problem shows up that we didn't know about. We're going to have to work with
I
your,
agree with-
yeah,
that I
right?
agree with.
So I mean, I just want to be honest. I don't want somebody to come back and say, hey, you said, we think we can execute the same site plan. And that's what I've been told. Go ahead.
And
I felt them on my presence here.
Now, I just wanted to make clear for the record, a lot of what you're asking for, very good questions, things that have to be addressed and that do get addressed, but they don't get addressed at site plan. A lot of the things you're asking about are not part of the site plan requirements. And so I appreciate a lot of these detailed questions. You told us we had to make sure to ground the antenna. You said, you started at the beginning, you pointed out we're going to need other permits, make sure you time it right so you're not delayed. Excellent points. But the reason that you're not getting all of the granular, fine detail you want about some of these construction techniques is because we're only at site plan. And until we have actual construction drawings that implement how we then build this site plan, we're not necessarily going to have the answers to your questions. And I don't mean that in a combative way, but we're not going to go to the level of detail that you're asking for on a lot of these issues necessarily until we know we get a site plan that you all agree with.
Right.
And then we'll address all these issues. And you're more than welcome, I think, to. It would be outside your purview as a planning commission member, but you're obviously a very technically detailed engineer, and no one's going to mind you looking at the drawings because they are going to have to comply. I mean,
Well,
at the end of the day, we
that's-
must comply.
That's what really led to this question, which was the same one that I posed a year ago. Based on the then information that was provided in the HC report, and based on the dimensionality of what was being done, and you took the sheet from me because it was from my typed notes, that at that point, with the known information we had, and that was in that diagram, that building could not be built the way it was laid out by Mr. Falat with the dimensions involved. You would need another foot in each direction in order to build it. Now, the presentations that were made in the last couple of months by the other engineer and I forget his name, I apologize. Sanjay.
Good guy.
And he got one thing right and one thing completely wrong. And that's because of the nature of what we wanted our town to be. And so that's a given. In that context, what he described, even what he described, if I looked at those two diagrams, they were just hand sketches, I guess, or they're done on a PC. One of them was wrong in terms of the dimensionality again, and in fact, the same problem, which is what concerned me, is the physical building that was being projected with the required dimensions of the concrete and the required specifications, you'd end up, your building would be several inches less in each direction, which then would trigger the fact it's a cascading problem. And there's nothing wrong with designing things to the maximum. That's absolutely the prerogative, and yours and Mr. Falat's, no question about that. But as a planning commissioner, when I'm given data that indicates there's a problem, my job is to say there's a problem and identify it for you. As it stands right now, as was just pointed out by Mr. Zeldo, I said that wrong? Yeah. I did it right. It's at that precipice where we don't know, and apparently you're working on to figure out if in fact it does affect it. And there's a cascading effect with it, with the technique that you're selecting. And so far, the data that I've looked at, which doesn't include what you've now entered into a new technique, you may still have the same, because we're talking about a matter of inches. That's the problem.
We've been assured it's going to work in the same site plan area. So yeah, we need to show you.
Okay.
I agree.
This is an easy one then. And it's probably easy, probably for Matt or yourself. With regard to the runoff issue, with regard, which has already been identified in a previous report in 2022,
Yeah.
that went to the Director of Public Works with regard to various implications of runoff of oil, grease, and heavy metals, that the very existence of the parking garage is going to generate and flow into the storm drain system, and it's not filtered anywhere. So my question to Matt is, and really to both of you, what's the implications? Because I think it goes far beyond the Soil Conservation District approval. Am I in error on that?
My understanding, again, and some of these, I'm not an absolute expert on, and this is one of them. So
Okay.
I'm relying on the response that was given because.
Also, don't, we have local code for fats, oil, and grease ordinance, do we not?
We
Yeah,
do.
Okay.
So we would meet whatever Mr. Janis says we have to do.
So that's another one of
obviously.
these that eventually has to be met that is not described in the
He's got a
facility.
big job ahead of him. So that I will
Always
tell
do.
you. He has a big job.
And Mr. Strange, I'll just add for the record, DENREC does not allow unfiltered water to be discharged anymore. I mean, every stormwater discharge now, there's got to be filtering. So I appreciate, again, a good comment, good observation. It does get addressed now.
Okay.
My-
will be
My
addressed.
planners would have helped too.
And Mr. Strange, may I add that runoff needs to be addressed solely on the property. It can't go anywhere else. So that we do have a code provision that states that directly.
Okay, and so that may in fact affect the physicality of the design and may conflict with something else, which is one of those that you
Yeah, but
don't know
we
yet.
usually are able to handle it
Okay.
pretty innocuously.
Okay. The other one, the antenna.
Oh,
Going back 5 years ago, when this was first presented in a very different form, and Mr. Falat presented it, it wasn't presented as an antenna, it was presented as an architectural embellishment, and I was the one who made the comment that it violated the code because it was too tall. And you couldn't do it. Later on, Mr. Falat changed the description to an antenna, and then later, Mr. Forston, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, changed it to again, a correction to the antenna and said it was stealthed. It doesn't meet any definition by the Federal Communications Commission or our own standards of being stealth. As an antenna, the only drawing we have, which is the drawing of record, it isn't shown as an antenna, it's shown as a thing, a physical embellishment.
right.
And although it's a gross analogy, but I think it cuts to the quick of the chase, if you will, is that you can put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. This is an architectural thing.
Right.
It is not an antenna. It's just not presented that way, and it can't be there for us to approve it. However, having said that, if you wish to have a structure like this, you'd have to go to the Board of Adjustment to get a variance. The other part is, And it isn't related to the, quote, whether it's an antenna or not. It's one of the things that we're required to evaluate, and that is architectural massing and the compatibility within the immediate area of the region. It doesn't appear to meet that standard that we're supposed to evaluate of the impact of its physical mass in relationship to the surrounding community. Without it and just the cupola, it seems like that's pretty good because that you can do because of the 3.0 FAR that you have approval for. But this thing that's labeled as an antenna, which isn't, I think you have a very big problem, and I think it's in a position where we can't approve it as is. It shouldn't be there. If you wish to have it there, then go to the Board of Adjustment to get a variance.
Okay.
And that's all I'll
Just
say
a
on
couple things, and I hear you, and a couple things is it was going to be used to broadcast FM sound outward channels, but I would suggest that we have a conversation about this for a couple other reasons. One is, and we've been involved in a lot of projects where low frequency radio towers, and by the way, it's old school, it's not new school. People are still concerned that communication with cellular phones could be disrupted in an emergency scenario. And I would just put out here that for one of our clients, we do this on every project, and everything we touch is put basically a transponder outward so that people can communicate as a backup to whether it be lifeguard stations, whether it be certain parts of this city, that if we get hit with something massive and takes out your cell towers, that this, believe it or not, these systems survive because they're very old school. There's not a lot of technology in them. And I think if the city was looking a little forward, I think we would be okay with figuring out a way to utilize it to help the city have an emergency transponder system for the property. I'm just putting that out there.
Well, you're not aware of this, but I'm an FCC licensed commercial technician for 45 years. And I know a lot about antennas.
Yeah.
What you just described can be achieved and doesn't require the current thing
Right.
as it's described and on the hotel. The other aspect of it is not that, but it's also the massing issue of that in relationship to the totality of the building.
Okay.
And that gets to be very problematic,
Okay.
which we're supposed to evaluate. So there's really two things here of major significance. And you can achieve what you're describing for, quote, emergency telecommunications in a way that you wouldn't even know it was there.
Okay.
Where right now, it's very obvious it's there, and it really isn't an antenna, and it really is not stealth by any definition. So
Well,
that's
let
all I'll
me-
say.
But let's have this, finish this conversation, because I think it's a little unfair. First of all, if you go back and look at the original postcard and pictures of the Belhaven, we're trying to kind of bring back the feel that was there. I'm sorry. We're trying to bring back a feel, and when I described it as an architectural element, I mean, I think it's a very nice touch, and you're not going to see it if you're standing on the street, obviously, because the building will interfere with it. You'll see it at a distance. But you just said to us that it doesn't look like an antenna, and therefore it must not be an antenna. But that's really part of the disguise, isn't it? I mean, I don't think we can have it both ways. We can't say you got to have it stealth, but then it doesn't look like an antenna.
There's some distracting
Yeah.
stuff going on that's really been going on too long throughout this meeting. Can you,
Stealth, it gets back again to definitional requirements in terms of what a stealth antenna is. A stealth antenna is one that you don't see. When you look at that, you obviously see it, no matter what it's described as. The second part is it's massing so there's really two issues here. And the effect that you're trying to create with this hotel to bring back the old hotel imagery, so to speak, you seem to have achieved that a great deal. And you may be, in fact, if your cupola was a little bit smaller, you can put something up there that's a little bit taller and achieve your objectives. But in this particular case, I think it's incumbent upon the Planning Commission. We can't approve things that are definitionally inaccurate, because then everyone will say, well, it's a this when it's actually a that. Or the example that I just said, which was gross, but it gets to the core of it. If you put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. You can't get around that. And it's a terrible analogy, but the simplicity of it is the situation we find ourselves in with this right now. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And
Well, what I said, I think perhaps you didn't hear, because I disagree with your entire premise. The codes, I mean, the stealthing tech world really comes from, I'll say, cell phone towers, right? Everybody now, if you're going to build a cell phone tower anywhere, it's got to be stealth, whatever that means. And you'll see occasionally these really, in my view, hideous and ugly-looking fake trees that everyone knows as soon as you see it, oh, that's a cell tower. It's not really hidden at all, right? I actually think the really thin monopoles, they're very hard to see. They actually are the best, but that's a conversation for another day. Here, you're allowed to have an antenna, right? Nobody disputes that. We're allowed to have an antenna. It's got to be stealthed. Now, what does stealthed mean? To me, stealth means it doesn't look like an antenna. That's all. And I would submit to you that the way this is designed, it doesn't, you just said, I thought I heard you say it didn't look like an antenna. And so if it doesn't look like an antenna, but it's an antenna, isn't it stealthed? I mean, we can go back and forth forever on this, but I think it's a wonderful added touch to this design that makes it better. It's going to be a functioning antenna because it has to be. And so therefore it meets the code. I mean, I just, you may not like it, you personally.
no, it's not a question of like, it's what the code says right now, and you just indicated your interpretation of stealth. Your interpretation of stealth does not match what's written in the code in Rehoboth Beach and doesn't match what's written in the Federal Communications Commission of what stealth is. So I'm going by the code, you're going by your own personal feelings. I could care less. It's just what I'm saying is, as a planning commissioner, it does not meet code. It is not what it is, and it's not shown that way on the diagram and never has been shown that way for 5 years. So you're stuck with a difficult situation, but there is an out if you wish to do it, is to get a variance for it.
If an antenna is permitted, subject to being stealth, stealth doesn't mean invisible, right? Because there's no such thing as invisibility, at least as far as I know, as a matter of science. So I can't have an invisible antenna. Somebody's going to know something's there, right?
It's
If
a function
stealth.
of the environment. So if you look up and you can see it perceivably as an isolated event, that's not stealth. If it blends in with the environment, which in fact what our code talks about, the FCC does not take that approach. Theirs is very specific in that you shouldn't be able to see it. So it's a problematic definition. But it is what it is, and right now it isn't. And as I said, there is an option if you wish to pursue that, but I don't control that.
If I covered it with clapboard and it didn't look like an antenna, isn't it stealthed?
No, because you can perceive it separate from the environment.
Is there a definition of stealth in your code? Because if there is, I missed it.
Yeah, take a look at 270-4. So stealth technology for wireless communications is defined in 270. You want to just take a look at it. Make whatever argument. The question was for a definition, and take a look at that definition, whether you do it now or tonight or
So it
tomorrow.
says-
Just make
I've got
whatever.
it, and I think this supports what I just said, I mean, I really don't understand. We're trying to do something right. I think it fits with the code, and we're getting pushback. But here's what it says. Camouflaging or screening methods applied to wireless communications facilities and accessory equipment, which render them more visually appealing, or blend the proposed facility into the existing structure or visual backdrop in a manner appropriate to the site's context and surrounding environment. So it doesn't say that you don't have to know something's there. It doesn't say you can't see what's stealth. All it says is which render them more visually appealing or blend the proposed facility into the existing structure or visual backdrop in a manner appropriate to the site's context.
Right.
And that's why I say, you go back and you look at the historic Belhaven Inn, and what did it have? It had a spire reaching into the sky. And that's what we're proposing. And I think that it meets the requirement that says this makes, I would say, the entire building more visually appealing or blend the proposed facility into the existing structure. That's all we're trying to do.
But the first, when you go back to that in the structure of the sentence, it starts off with camouflaging.
May I just join in here? This is a very interesting technical definition where people are advocating their own personal views. I just want to say for the record that what we are trying to do today is to get closure on the application that has been filed. And our job is to make sure that we believe what's proposed is code compliant, and where we think there is an issue, to point it out to you to help you understand what the concern is, and to provide, where possible, options and approaches that would allow you to either get the approvals that are necessary from other parties to do what you want, or to adjust your plans to make them code compliant. Now, we just had a very long and involved and scholarly discussion of stealth technology, antennas, what the code requires and what it doesn't. But to me, part of what we're charged to do here is to look at the CDP, to consider the community, to make sure what is proposed is consistent with existing architectural massing, scale of the community. Specifically, we are charged with considering the height of buildings. And so I think this is no matter how you slice and dice it, this is an important issue to get on the table. And we are just suggesting that it is appropriate for us to suggest that you either pursue a variance, pursue other options, fix the antenna to the roof, remove the antenna. There are things that you could be doing here, but we certainly can't close our eyes to what the code requires. And I say that not to take sides with anyone, but just to kind of get people going in a direction where we bring this to a close, which I believe is something you folks have been urging us to do week after week.
I appreciate everything you just said, and you're exactly right. But my point, if I seem passionate or it seemed like we're having an extended discussion here, is we didn't just willy-nilly put this on and hope you guys would just let it go. I mean, we read the code, right? The building inspector read the code. And we read the code to say we could do this. And that's why I was explaining to Commissioner Strange here. I think the code allows this. I don't think we have to go to the Board of Adjustment, which is time-consuming and expensive. Now, if you guys disagree and want to approve this plan without the spire, I mean, there's not much I can do about that. Obviously, you're free to vote and do what you want to do. But the point, my point in getting up and responding to Mr. Strange is because I think here's one example where we have a different interpretation of the code, and of course, as we know, where codes can be interpreted differently in the land use context, it's supposed to be interpreted in favor of the property owner. We didn't just do this, though, because it makes us money. I mean, this costs us money to do this, but we thought this was a nice architectural feature. It harkened back to the Belhaven originally, and it's worth doing.
Yeah, I was just pointing out that you may have a different interpretation of one provision of the code. I'm not sure that
I think we
your
have,
discussion.
we agree, and I appreciate your comments, sir. From 1898 to 1962, there was a antenna, spire, steeple on the corner of that Rehoboth Avenue and the boardwalk. If you can see the image here, this is not a fantasy image. This was here. The only reason why we have that on our building today is because it existed then. That's the only reason, right? It's not there because what we're trying to do is create a sense of continuity from 1892 into the future of Rehoboth Beach, okay?
But
And,
can I, may,
let me,
can
please,
I-
let me,
I- yeah,
let me
please.
finish, okay? We believe, and Mr. Janis, the building inspector, agrees that the provision of an antenna in this location, in this form, in this shape, meets the building code as it's written today. Now, there may be other interpretations, et cetera, et cetera. We've been asked to stealth it, we stealthed it. If you look at definitions on stealthing, there are two ways to stealth an antenna. One is to provide a black box that's at the bottom of the antenna that is a stealthing mechanism that's full of electronics and has no visual things. The other way to stealth an antenna is to make it look like something else, right? This is making that antenna look like something else. Okay, what does it look like? It looks like that, right? So we appreciate the fact that Mr. Strange pointed out 3 or 4 weeks ago, 3 or 4 sessions ago, you need to stealth the antenna. Well, we stealth the antenna, okay? We stealth the antenna both with the black box and from the visual point of view. Now, if for some reason or another, this planning commission believes that this building should not have an antenna on it for whatever reason, maybe because they think it's not code compliant, we respectfully disagree. The building inspector has endorsed our point, and we think that you all ought to go with the idea that what we're trying to do is create a sense of continuity here. If this building didn't have a green roof that was sloped like a pyramid, the building we're proposing today would have no roof, okay? It'd be a flat roof. But we are trying to create a sense of community with this new $100 million investment in the future of the city and tie it back to the historic character of it. That's it.
May I
Sure.
was listening to
Please.
you. May I ask you a question? Because I actually was trying to do a little historical research, and the only thing I could find were photographs and renderings like that.
Right.
Just to satisfy my own personal curiosity, do you have any idea how tall that spire was?
So-
Because it looks to me like it's not 60 feet. I don't know that for sure, but I,
Because only 2 floors before.
Well,
yes.
more than likely, it's not 60 feet tall. But it sits on top of the roof of a building in a similar the way our building sits on top. Like, we're not gonna, we have to make a building that works with today's economics. And, real estate values are what they are. That building didn't have retail on the ground level. It was all hotel, right? So it's a different kind of circumstance, but no, I would say more than likely, we did the same exercise. You figure there's 2 stories there, maybe that's 24 feet, right? You figure the sloped green part is probably another 10 feet, so maybe it's 36 feet. And then maybe that thing on top of it is another 10 or 15 feet, right?
And
So,
I understand your point, and I asked the question not
no,
to take the argument one way or another, but just to complete the record in terms of what you were trying to do and what the facts are.
yeah, and for the record, we're probably lower from where the white starts to the top of that element than what's shown on this image here. I think if we were allowed to build something more exactly like that, it would be even taller. So we kind of feel like we've got a happy compromise, but,
I have a question. How tall does it need to be how tall is the antenna
how tall is the antenna?
itself?
I think it's approximately 15 feet tall.
And how tall is the top of the, whatever you call it?
The cupola?
Yeah. The
it's-
spire.
Well, as far as the antenna.
The spire is the antenna, they're one and the same.
Okay, so there's no space between the physical mechanical equipment and the top of your,
No,
okay.
no. So to answer your question.
That's
the
15
cupola-
feet.
The cupola itself, I believe, is 50. The eave of the building is at 42, which is what's required. The cupola is allowed to be 50 feet tall, so it's 50 feet tall.
Right.
And then I think we're another 15 feet plus or minus. I don't know, Matt, do you have a dimension? But it's somewhere around that. And could it be taller? We'd like it to be taller. Could it be fatter? We'd like it to be fatter. But we're proposing what we're proposing right now. We think it's a happy compromise. And we know it's by code. It's a judgment call.
Okay, well, I think we've,
I know.
I think we've talked the cupola.
I'd like to add one thing, and people would like to know. I was raised there. I lived in an apartment on the right-hand building, on the right side of the corner. There's an apartment back there that was about 900 feet. It overlooked Wilmington Avenue. There was an open space behind there. I ran through that building as a little kid, was raised there until I was about 24 years old. Now, that building in the back that people call 4 stories is really 5 stories because there was a breathing space underneath that building that was almost 3.5 to 4 feet high because those carpenters those days used regular lumber, no treated lumber, obviously. So they wanted to make sure that with the dampness we had down here, things stayed dry, and they were very prescient because it did stay dry. But that building in back, when you look at it carefully, is when you get to the precipice, and there's, pardon me, I'm hoarse from my allergies, had a chimney coming out of it. There were fireplaces in there. That's 5 stories tall, and it's not on Wilmington Avenue side at all. It's all in the property that we call the Belhaven, was 100 feet on the boardwalk, 220 feet down the avenue. And when we get to the 220 feet section, that the apartment in the back is where I was raised. So in answer to your question about that antenna, it's approximately 35 to 40 feet, approximately. I don't think any more than 40 feet to its top. It was there all the years that I was raised there. Any other questions? And I'm willing to sit down.
Are we back,
Wanna keep
Commissioner?
going?
Are we
Yeah,
going to
please.
continue?
The trash room, I guess, is next.
Again, you're right, this is all part of the package, so it's part of the commission's job to ask these questions. So we're good with that. So let's keep going.
Whatever, I mean.
Yeah, I want to just ask 3 real quick
Oh, yeah,
questions.
go ahead. We're good.
With respect to trash,
Yes.
you mentioned when Mr. Strange was speaking to you
Yeah.
that you have experience managing trash in very expensive,
Yeah.
complex property. You do understand the code requires that if any of that trash is moved outside, it has to be screened?
Yes.
Second question, just so I understand your plans correctly, we had a discussion about planters and railings.
Planters and, I'm sorry?
And railings.
Railings, yes.
And I understand why you want to do that. Those seem like good, practical, solid
Right.
reasons. But I feel compelled to understand the plan itself. Those planters and railings on the highest level are they more than 42 feet above grade? Okay.
They are. And that's because the parapet for the mechanical system is also back and higher. And so it's that run from getting to the roof to the facility, it's the issue. So, but as I said, that is, I think that is substantially more important than the planters. I think the planters are just a nice thing to have, number one. Number two, it helps with water runoff, and that's part of the stormwater, trying to manage the flow of rain. It helps. It's not hugely helpful, but it helps. It's one of those nice to have, but we're not gonna not do this hotel because of the planters. So again, that's something, well, if we have to get a variance for it, if that's what you deem necessary for the planters, so be it. I mean, okay. And we may go for it because it may look good. Again, what everybody's got to understand, this is a 4 to 5 star hotel. It's going to be the highest level of the entity that we signed a deal with. So when we talk about trash and all those things being left outside and all that, and how we run the hotel, we're going to charge a lot a night for the rooms. And if we don't deliver a very high-end experience, we will be out of business or lose lots of money. And so there's a lot of motivation. Plus, we have the flag will be on us. They're not going to allow that to happen either because they have a lot of pressure on us.
One other thing about the trash real quick, and sorry, Jeff, for interrupting. If you look at our site plan, the trash is all inside. There is no place outside to put trash, even if we thought maybe we'd want to do that, which we wouldn't want to do. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah. And number two to that, I know, Mr. Strange, I'll just go ahead and finish trash, is that it will be air-conditioned and controlled and contained environment.
Well, that was, it was. My
Yeah, I got you.
There's several things here, and I think Mr. Forston, when he indicated the answer he gave me is not what he really wanted. The last thing you want is a room that's containing trash to be heated.
Correct.
Absolutely the worst possible
AC.
thing you can do. Along those lines, what does bother me, though, is, and we have several four-star hotels in Rehoboth, but not a five-star, which is what you're claiming you're going to do. All the literature, all the research for the last 30 years shows that five-star hotels generate the maximum amount of trash.
Yep.
Of what's called municipal solid waste.
Yep.
And in this particular case, you've got a lot of recyclables, which we assume are going to happen. But one of the larger spaces that you have also may be a restaurant, which is not defined, which generates a significant amount, and depending on the hours of operation, the number of meals that are served, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the ballroom, the amount of trash that's generated. And the questions I had were engendered, and the data that I submit, that I assume you may have seen this
I
as
read it,
well,
yeah.
was based on the fact that this is a high-end hotel, which generates the maximum amount of trash. And the way the room is currently designed, when I looked at it and did the calculations, it appears to be insufficient unless you're going to be cycling trucks in and out at a high rate of speed. The other part is, as you pointed out earlier, how is and I don't know what you're doing, is how is the trash going to be conveyed out of that room, placed for pickup? Because the way your dock is designed, the way the trash is coming out, it typically can't, with this design, it can't be put in what's considered a traditional dumpster or a roll-off or roll-on because your whole area is not designed to accommodate that.
Yep.
So what I identified was, it seems that it's an Achilles heel, that what I looked at is not practical from the standpoint of the probable anticipated trash generation. So my question to you is, how are you going to, what means are you taking the trash to the area that it's going to be taken away? Because as you pointed out, it's not going to be screened because it's not going to be on the street.
Right.
So what's the method you're using?
Your calculations are the assumption that it's all there at one time. You know, I was looking at what you did. I get where you're going for, but when you deal with restaurants, you're dealing with certain time frame categories. You got 12 to 2 for lunch. You got 5 to 8 for dinner. And then if you have special events, you have special events. And typically, the way we run these is when we have the restaurant has its own pickup for its trash in and out as it relates to their time frames that they're managing. The hotel itself has plenty of time because we really don't generate a lot of stuff. Most of the stuff for the hotel side of it is linens, laundrables, sending out tablecloths, selling out sheets, linens, a lot of towels, lots of towels. Towels are crazy. That I will tell you, that's probably the biggest issue we have, especially with a beachfront resort. People use them and steal them. That's the best way, then we don't have to clean them. But it costs us money. So it is going to be managed, and during those high times, like the end of the night for hotel, it will either be a very early morning pickup or that evening pickup to get rid of it. It's similar to what we do in New York, the same way. The day of the restaurant, we'll do it. We don't expect this restaurant, by the way, just so you understand, to be extremely high volume. We just don't see that. There will be events like we talked about, or conferences, I think is where we ended up after a 3-hour discussion of what that was called. But that'll be managed the same way. So I think there'll be a lot of pickups, and I think there'll be a specialized, this is our operator of it, so let's talk to him for a second, because he's the one that has to get it out of here.
Need your name, please, sir, and have you testified here before?
Yes, about a month ago,
You
yeah.
understand you're still under oath?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
What-
I'm
name,
Jim
please.
Keeley. I'm with Real Hospitality Group. We're based in Ocean City. We manage 12 hotels from Ocean City to Frederica, but we are also the 12th largest operator in the U.S. We have a large presence in New York, Manhattan, the boroughs. So we're used to a lot of different scenarios and managing, and that's our job, to make sure that whatever scenario we have to manage, we do it correctly. Because number one, we want to make sure our guests come back and we provide the excellent experience so that we give this hotel the reputation that it deserves. So when it comes to management of trash and things like that, obviously it would be operated based on the needs of the hotel and how it would not interfere with guests, with traffic, all of those things. So, it would depend on, once we open the restaurants, what their needs are and so forth. So that's how we operate. And we do it in a way where we figure out what's the most efficient way to do something. So, a lot of times it'll be early morning or evening, like Mr. Zell just spoke about, but it would be based on business needs as well.
Right, but my question goes back to what Mr. Zell said, is I did estimates based on daily generation of the actual amount of trash that is coming from the people that you're renting a room to. And so it involves the rooms, and they generate X amount, and the data is out there, and I'm sure you know what it is. When you take that number and you multiply it out, and you consider the summer season, for example, peak season, and the potential loading from the stores that currently exist, which you can get that data directly from them. As a planning commissioner, I can't talk to them, but you can. So you know exactly how much is generated during those days. And that's going to result in X amount of pounds of municipal solid waste. My concern was the design of the room in terms of its physical capacity, based on my knowledge and experience where I've testified on these things on solid waste as an expert in the court. Your numbers appear to be very light, and so the room dimensions appear to be too small. I'm concerned about that because I don't know how the room size was generated, because it appears to be insufficient unless you're cycling this stuff out daily, which then creates other secondary problems. So that's my question. I think it's light. You also have the ballroom, which I didn't take into account. So it appears to be problematic in scale.
Okay, so a couple things. Everybody's talking to me. The bottom line is it was designed for the size of this hotel. And we have professionals that actually did the room, and we have to manage. This is all done with how many times we have to come and pick it up and get it out of there is really what it gets down to. That goes on the onus of the operator only because we got to maintain the quality. We have to get it out of there. So if that means we got to go 2 times a day for high season and 3 times a day on Saturdays because it's super high season, and we're going to do it. Now, if we can find to be able to expand this room slightly at a later date or find a way to deal with it, we will deal with it. But our consultants that we hired to do this, gave the numbers to Peter, and dealing with Jim's group, this is where we ended up. They think it can be done no problem because it's a boutique hotel.
Okay.
It's
What I
not
was asking-
it's not a massive hotel. It's
Right, but I was
92
asking for
rooms.
the analytics that justified it, and that was missing.
Yeah, it's done by professionals. It's done by experience, candidly, more so than analytics. These guys saw it and basically are going to have to deal with it, and that's what we designed. If we're wrong, the resolution to it is we just got to get more pickups. That's what happens here. We end up spending a lot more money on trash removal
Right.
in an accelerated basis. But it doesn't go bad. It doesn't affect the surrounding. It doesn't smell because we can't. It just can't happen. So it's just we're going to end up losing more money because instead of 8 pickups a week, we have 16. So that's how it goes down. But we'll look at it as we get it rolling.
Right, and that's, I mean, there's this sequela that keeps expanding out when things are done wrong, no matter what it is. But if you have to go to several times the pickups a day, I'm sure you're familiar that the traffic problem in Rehoboth Beach is somewhat extreme.
I understand, but
During the
that's,
summer months.
but that's, our whole goal is not to show up here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when everybody's going to the beach with a trash truck. That's why I was saying to you, just like traffic studies, Jim's gonna figure out that the restaurant goes out at 10 o'clock at night, okay? Or 6 or 7 in the morning. Those are the times that we move trash, late at night, early in the morning.
Right.
We don't do it when people are getting to the beach or
I'm
walking.
assuming-
That would be the worst thing that could happen around here.
This whole thing was engendered by using standard calculations.
No,
It appears
I
that
get
there
it,
was
and I
insufficient volume.
appreciate your calculations in doing that, and you know, I get it, but, I mean, the solution is more pickups.
Okay.
And not avoiding summer people. I
Right.
don't want to get anywhere near this place between 10:30 and 5 o'clock.
And not heating the room.
Yeah, exactly. And no heating allowed.
That's right. Well, actually, I mean,
No, I know, I saw that too. I know. It should have it's cooling only.
yeah, that's essential. Okay, parking space dimensions.
Here, you want-
And here there was a difference, and the concern was that there were vertical structural supports
Yeah.
in the clear space. And Mr. Forston indicated, he says, well, the code doesn't prohibit columns. The code doesn't prohibit columns because the code is very explicit that you have a clear space of 162 square feet. It also doesn't preclude a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, so here's what we do. We get paid a lot of money to do this one. What we're really doing, I mean, you can't build a garage without columns.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, so number one. Number two, my job is not to throw columns in the middle of spaces because then they're not operable spaces. Got that part too. So what we're trying to do is once we get the matting and how we're going to set up the column rhythms going above, we have to make sure the ones down below are not impacting any of the spaces.
Right.
So they'll be adjusted based on the grid pattern because we get to do it one time, Commissioner Strange, when we're pouring that concrete in that column. Once it's in, we're done. So when that goes down and we lay out the spaces, the columns that'll carry the building above will be placed. And if we have to move them a foot or two in different directions, you know as well as I do, we do this on site. We have usually, by the way, it's done by computers now. The structural engineer will just load in the different calculations and we can move 3 feet this way, 2 feet this way, and we'll start setting the columns. And the job of the columns is to keep them out of the spaces so that we maintain the 162.
Right.
And
But
not hit.
again, as a planning commission, we have to look at the plan that was submitted to us.
Yeah.
And there's conflicts all over the place. In some cases, they're not major,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, the columns exist.
But as I said to start this, we're not at that point. I mean, once we set the manner by which the walls are set and then that concrete's poured, we're going to come back to the building inspector, Mr. Janis, and say to him, look, we moved these 3 columns or this 8 columns into this pattern because we needed to move it because it was in the middle of the spaces, number 1, 2, it wasn't holding the load correctly. Again, this is kind of done once the slab is poured and once we set up the rebar for the column. So my point is we're not trying to put them in the middle of spaces. If we do, I get fired. And then you yell at me for doing it and saying you can't do it. But okay,
Well, it's not
now,
even-
now Richard's going to give you the technical reason, but I'm just giving you
Right,
reality.
as was said, this will be the learner response. The code does not require a 9 by 18 uninterrupted, nothing in that area parking space. It says only that you have to have 162 usable square feet of space. Cars are not 9 feet wide. If they were, and our requirement was a parking spot of 9 feet in width, you'd park cars next to each other, nobody could get out because the doors would hit the
Actually,
car next
sir,
door.
you're interpreting the code incorrectly. It's 162 feet of usable area for each vehicle and shall not be less than 9 feet in width and 18 feet in length. That's what the code reads.
Well, and I read that to say the parking space itself has to be 9 by 18, which if you do the math is 162 square feet.
Right.
But it doesn't mean, and by the way, some of these spots are not 9, most of them are not quite 9 by 18. It doesn't mean that you can't have a parking column intruding an inch, 2 inches, 3 inches into the spot. I happened to drive around Rehoboth this morning. And I took some pictures, and I'm happy to show them to you. I've got pictures from 2nd Virginia Avenue. There are parking columns that are a couple of inches into the parking spots. I took some pictures at the hotel next to on the other side of 2nd Virginia Avenue. I forget the name of it now. Guess what? Parking columns that intrude an inch or two into the parking spot. I took another picture. There's a condominium building. Parking columns are actually like 3 or 4 inches into either side of the parking spot. The cars get in because they're not 9 feet wide. People can open their doors. As long as there's 162 usable square feet, then you're fine. And so we submitted those measurements. I don't know that you were at that meeting when we did. We had the architect go out, or not go out, but carefully measure all the spots on his drawing, and we submitted the chart for each spot. There's more than 162 square feet. But the fact that there might be a column that extends an inch or two into one side or the other of a parking spot doesn't make, that's not prohibited by this code. You've done it in other spots in this city.
But if the column is there, then it's not 162 square feet. It's something less than that.
Only if the spot itself is only a perfect 9 by 18 square feet.
So you're saying you created larger spaces to account for the columns?
Mr. Forston,
Okay.
how many of the buildings that you visited this morning were constructed before the zoning requirement came into effect?
But he's saying they took into account the columns. That's what he's saying.
Let me explain
Yeah.
this, okay?
Okay.
First of all, we used Walker Parking as our parking consultant. They are an internationally recognized expert on parking garage design, okay? It is not unusual to have spaces with columns on the space. When we were and they usually, because what Mr. Forston said is exactly right, cars are not 9 feet wide. So when we laid out this garage, we spoke with the building inspector and we said, is it okay if we have columns on the center line of the spaces? And the answer was, yes, that is what we do here in Rehoboth. And these are examples, these are pictures of what Mr. Janis was referring to. So based on this history, we proceeded with designing the spaces the way we did, right? It's not amateur hour. We checked before we did it. We are in agreement with the building inspector. Now, Mr. Strange may not agree that this is legal. However, according to the building inspector, this is legal. And that's clearly.
This is not covered in the building inspector's report, so I didn't actually know that before. In fact, I was going to ask Mr. Janis, the latest report is March 12th, 2024, correct? That's the last report. So that actually doesn't reflect any plans, the final plans that we're looking at, which are dated May 10th. It may only be minor points, but I guess I just wanted to confirm that the last report was on March 12th, and I was just doing it, well, while we've been sitting here, I've been looking through it to see if it addressed that issue, and it does not. And it does say that, you know, that it acknowledges the Planning Commission may identify additional criteria that may need to be corrected or revised in future submissions. So we're getting to information here that the building inspector did not cover for us.
Fair enough, but I mean, that's the point I'm trying to make. This is something that was taken into consideration when we designed the garage. It is not included in the square footage of per space that we submitted to the building inspector post the most recent comment, which was, I think, either in March or April or whenever the first issue came up of, are the spaces 162 feet? Okay. They are all larger than 162 square feet of area, exclusive of the column. Okay, so we feel like we've adequately addressed this issue. And Wilson, can we give these to you? Yes, please. Is that possible? Okay.
Matt,
They have space in the front. but
can I
yes,
ask Matt a
width and
question?
vice versa.
So you've measured the spaces and that your measurements show that they're 162 feet exclusive of the columns. Is that correct? Or haven't you measured it like that?
I don't want that. I could care less.
I will have to go back to see exactly, because we're talking about March,
Right.
and here we are in July, but I would have to look exactly to how I measured that.
Okay.
I can look here as
All
we're,
right.
as we're discussing.
Okay.
And Matt, would you also please check to see how many of these buildings in which these photographs were taken were built before this parking requirement was put into effect. So in this respect, they'd be non-conforming, legally non-conforming, but non-conforming.
Right. Certainly.
Mr. Forston, are these photos to be made part of the record?
Submitted them, we refer to them, I think they should become part of it.
No, I agree. I'm just wanting to know who to give them to. Shouldn't we give them to Ms.?
I gave an extra set,
Okay,
Oh, okay,
and I gave a set to Mr. Janice as well.
okay, great,
Okay.
thank you.
good job.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Should we continue on?
Yeah, go ahead. Structural issues?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I.
Are we back to Commissioner Strange?
Yeah.
Are we back to
Yes, he's
Commissioner
talking-
Strange?
We're still
Since
going.
it's-
Wait, are the photos labeled as to the address?
Are do we know, can I see those, Earl?
Sure.
That's a good question. Are they labeled as to what buildings these are? No.
Is it all,
I will, if with the chair's permission, with y'all's permission, I will label them tomorrow. I apologize. I'll
Sure.
get the actual street address of where they are. so
Sure,
you have that.
okay, that's fine.
Please do.
Yeah,
Okay.
good question.
One of these may have already been addressed, but I'm not, I couldn't tell if the drawing was changed and reflects it or not. With regard to the parking structural issues, there was three at the point, at least a month or so ago, three open issues. One was the west wall exit blind spot, and I was informed that that was changed, but then when I looked at Mr. Forston's response, it seemed that it wasn't, so is it or wasn't?
Yeah, this is where we could see cars. Yes, we added a piece that you can see through as you come.
So that section of wall is now not there.
Well, yeah, part of the wall, not the whole wall.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Obviously,
but
but
I-
part of it is, yes. He's going to show to you now.
Okay,
So that one's good.
so that's gone.
I apologize if I
If you see,
That panel's open.
Right, okay, so that, it's really open, okay, good. The west wall exit blind spot,
That's the
What
May,
page
that's
what
the
page
May
number is that?
10th. That's the May 10th. Okay.
Just what page number?
What page number is that? You do this.
yeah, you messed it up last time.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try this.
A0302.
okay. The other was the exit entrance width, and this is actually a question for Matt.
Go ahead, Mr. Strange.
Does the entrance and exit width, because it's both lanes in the same point of egress and access, is it required to be 24-foot clear?
It is.
Completely? But the entrance isn't 24 feet? Or did I misread that, or was it different?
The entrance is 20 feet, as per the answer I gave you.
I'm sorry, it's per the what?
Per the answer we
says
submitted,
it's
20
20
feet.
20 feet.
But it needs to be 24 feet.
Again, we worked with an international expert on parking garage design. Many times, a drive aisle that's 24 feet can be narrowed to 20 feet so that cars are adequately accommodated. Cars are 7 feet wide, by the way, so
That's
two cars are
irrelevant.
14 feet. That's 6 feet additional on either side, and that's standard practice in the world of parking design. However, if you desire that opening to be 24 feet wide, 4 more feet wide of opening into looking into the garage, we will be happy to accommodate that, sir.
And it's not a question of me, it's a question of the IBC
It is a
code.
question of you.
No, the
It is.
IBC
No, it
code.
isn't, sir. It's what the IBC code requires.
It is not what the IBC code requires. It's what this code refers to as the width of the drive aisle. It does not refer to the opening of the garage as it meets the street. There's no requirement there.
Well, just for the record, and again, this goes to, we're at site plan, we're not to International Building Code standards yet. I mean, regardless of the site plan that you all hopefully approve tomorrow, we still have to comply with the International Building Code. So if the International Building Code specifically requires 24 feet width entrance, and I don't think it does, I asked somebody I know who's a building
Well,
code
that's
inspector.
why I asked Matt, because I'm not
Yeah.
sure either, but
Yeah,
I'm raising the
but if
issue.
it does, then we'll have to do that. And if it doesn't, then we'll do
Then it
it the way it
doesn't.
is. So either way, we will comply with the International Building
In
Code.
other words, we agree. Okay.
I'm sorry, what?
We'll agree with check and see. If we have to do it, we'll do it. If it's
Well,
required.
it's-
Yeah, it's
I'm
up to-
not sure, that's why I
Yeah,
asked.
and we'll ask Matt.
Okay.
But
The other question related to the parking garage isn't related to, the width of anything. It relates to the nature of the code requirements under a whole series, which I think if you read, and I didn't need to go into it.
yeah, a lot of them.
ANSI and ASH, it's endless. The drawing as it's shown today doesn't seem to accommodate anything, and I think based on what you were saying earlier, that's yet to be
It'll be
determined.
developed within the plans with Matt and his group to make sure it complies, but there's a lot of work that has to be
Oh,
done for
yeah.
the structural side of this building.
Okay, so that addresses
And it
that.
addresses every one of the ones you put here, so that was a good list, candidly.
Okay. Okay. The foundations requirements we've talked about.
Yeah, we already did that.
Previously.
Yeah.
And it's still an open issue from the standpoint of you providing diagrams.
Yeah, we're going to build within that site plan that we said. We're not going to affect the adjoining properties, and we'll shore up our side to make sure it doesn't create an issue. And by the way, we have a ton of insurance, and if anything goes wrong, it looks like our contractor, for everybody to know, it looks like Whiting Turner out of Baltimore, which is bondable to about, I think, $5 billion the last I checked, give or take. That's big. So we'll have plenty of, we never want to collect it, but it's there if we need it, but we want to do it right. I mean, it's not about having insurance and then paying for somebody's problem, so, yeah. Go ahead.
So the question earlier is how high is the antenna being shown?
Going back.
Per these drawings, it's 11 and a half.
Oh, there you go, it shrunk.
So it's just measured it on the drawing.
So
I was wrong, 15 is not the drawing.
We saved 4 feet.
The totality is
Okay.
62.
Let me finish this.
The totality is approximately 62 feet.
I hate to open a issue that we've beaten to death, but,
I thought it
so
says
what is your point in showing us what the old hotel looked like specifically in relation to this spire? What's the point?
Design.
Okay, because it is higher than the height requirements allow.
Well, it's, because it's an antenna.
Okay.
It falls
But
outside
I'm
of the height
confused
limitation.
because I got the impression that it was there as an embellishment to meet history by the weight of what you're telling us about it.
Well, let's
So
just-
it's confusing.
Let's just be totally transparent.
Okay,
In order for us to have an element that looks like this,
you had to make
we
an
have to call an
antenna.
antenna
Okay.
so that we could actually have it look like what it was.
But
That's
it
it.
isn't.
It's an antenna. Matt's okay with it? We're okay with it? Question is, are you okay with it?
All done then.
Well, no,
That's
actually,
it.
we have to get through the site plan commission.
Yeah. Sit down.
Well,
Are we done with your list?
Hold on. I think things are getting a little frayed, and I think we need a little break.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
10 minutes. See you back here at 4:10.
You just have a few more pages. Okay, all right, we're going to reconvene.
Okay.
Chair is out for a second, he'll be back. Go ahead.
Yeah, this question is with regard to the plus review of 10/19/2021 and the Delaware Fire Marshal's office comments on the accessibility, since the hotel is on a dead-end street, you have no control over that, that's where it is, more than 300 feet long, which Wilmington Avenue is, requires 38-foot clear turnaround area. And this is first a question to Matt. Taking into account the parking spaces, is there 38-foot clear? It's just a question, because I don't know the answer, and I'm not allowed to go out and measure it.
Yeah, and I'm not positive on the answer with the information that I have provided by the applicant at this point either. So I have no information to unless I go out to the site specifically to do the count off myself, I don't have that
All right,
information.
that needs to be addressed.
Well,
And the question is, if it is, then the question is, whose problem is it if you don't have 38 feet turnaround? Is the city obliged to do something about it or not? It raises questions that I don't know, and yet we're supposed to know.
yeah. And I can't know what you know
Yeah.
if I don't know either. The fact of the matter is whether I build one hotel room or 90 or 400.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't make this
I'm not-
more than what it is.
I'm just bringing it up because
Yeah. So I think
what the implications are.
So, Commissioner Strange, first off, we'll go out and we'll measure after this hearing ends today, and we'll have that number for you tomorrow, if that's okay.
Because I can't.
No, I appreciate your observation. When I was out driving around, I probably should have measured that this morning as well. But the second item, and I'll say is, I mean, this issue is there whether we demolish what's existing and rebuild or not. I mean, we can't change it. The city perhaps could change it. Perhaps creating the drop-off zone would create more of a turnaround when you think about the way things are interrelated. But we'll get the measurements for you tomorrow. But I don't, there's nothing in the code that says adjacent to your building there must be sufficient turnaround or anything like that. And so in terms of compliance with the actual subdivision code, this is an off-site condition that isn't a requirement actually in your all's code. But let us get you the
Not our
measurements.
code, it's the state fire marshal. That's what I'm getting at. It's
Well,
problematic.
State Fire Marshal has a lot of requirements. And as somebody mentioned before, you've got pre-existing development. And so there's, Old Newcastle, if you've ever been up there, those streets are really narrow. But we'll get you the measurements and we'll have them for you tomorrow. I'll even try to get them to Luke before the meeting.
And the real question is, it's really one for Matt and for us, and it may end up involving the city commissioners, is what happens if it isn't?
right.
And I don't know.
We've done it in a lot of different places. Fire marshals have a lot of authority, and sometimes they'll just let it, they note it, and it is what it is. And they also make sure that the local fire station knows that that's the issue, so that when they respond, they know what they're doing.
Right. So,
So that may be what happens, I don't know.
okay,
But we'll get you the numbers.
okay. And then thank you.
Yeah.
My last one is going to be on the sidewalks. In the April 24 meeting, I mentioned the sidewalks and the underpinning, and it's irrespective of what technology you're going to use. But when you look at the sidewalks, on the Rehoboth Avenue side,
Okay.
you have a sufficient sidewalk area, because the engineer at that point, Sanjay, said, oh, I don't have to worry about that because the sidewalks are going to be taken out and destroyed. We're going to replace all new stuff. You can get away with that on Wilmington Avenue. I'm sorry, you can get away with that on the Rehoboth Avenue side if, in fact, you put up barriers and you take away the sidewalk. There's still, I believe, plenty of room for people to get to the beach and back with no trouble. Wilmington Avenue is completely different. If you take that sidewalk apart, that means thousands of people during the summer or even during the off-season are going to be walking in the street, which is unacceptable.
Yep.
From a general safety, which is one of the things we're supposed to consider is pedestrian safety, that's going to require you, which I'm sure you're very familiar with in doing, since you've done large-scale projects in cities, you're going to have to put steel plates, you're going to have to put gantries up and gate so that sidewalk remains open.
That's
and the work
correct.
that you have to do is going to have to be done underneath those steel plates or only open for a short period of time. I just wanted to clarify that I'll call it that skill set, that's what your people are going to do, and you can't
absolutely.
just take it out.
Absolutely.
So one of the conditions would be Rehoboth Avenue, you're in good shape, I think.
Yep.
Wilmington Avenue, it's probably going to be a requirement that you do, in fact, it'll be specified that you need to do that to maintain the free and safe flow of individuals on Wilmington Avenue.
Understand.
I'll turn it over to Nan. if that's-
Nan?
Your mic, Nan.
Okay. I just have a couple of follow-up questions with regard to the loading berths. At the last meeting that we had, I asked about the basis for the building inspector's change of determination with respect to the allowability of only one loading berth. And what I understood was that we'd be getting information as to whether there was any precedent and how that precedent went. And Mr. Janis, I haven't seen any response.
Thank you. So my research has just basically shown that the buildings that are existing in those natures have transformed into those. So this project is kind of on its own nature. So it's up to your determination of what you're looking for here.
I don't think I understood what you said. The buildings have transformed. Could you just repeat that? I'm not sure what you said.
So the buildings that have been mixed use, and your question was to loading docks.
Yes.
Thank you. The buildings that have that were once, let's just say abutting the avenue, they have transformed from, say, residential uses to commercial uses, which then transformed into mixed uses. So we don't have a great indication other than the Hotel Rehoboth or other examples, very limited examples, I should say, such as the Avenue, that show loading docks. So my inability to give you that information is just that there are no examples, really, other than First Street Station that have been built recently to answer the loading dock question.
Okay, but am I correct that First Street Station, there was a loading dock required and is in fact there?
Yes.
Even though the particular establishments were less than 15,000 square feet?
Correct, and I believe, and I don't want to speak for the building official at the time, but I believe that building was looked at as an overall, so use that hopefully
Built as an overall?
As an overall commercial building instead of just pieces and parts of the building. It was an overall building that automatically requires a loading dock.
It was built with one permit, is what you're saying.
Right.
But then, so is this.
It was built with one permit. It has one roof. The external walls encompass all of the small spaces.
Correct.
Which is the case here as well.
Right.
All right, so that does not provide a precedent.
Unfortunately, no.
And so what I'm going back to then is just, again, to make sure the record's clear, what I asked was, what was the basis for your changing your initial determination from a requirement of 2 loading berths to a requirement of 1?
So it was an after internal discussions with Wallace Montgomery, city manager, city solicitors, that we determined that was what we were going to put on record as the determination from our department.
But based on?
Based on what?
Based on our internal discussions and the analysis of the code.
Commissioner Hunter?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Janis, I believe at the last meeting, when you were asked this question, you had 2 reasons that you gave us for changing your opinion from the earlier determination, building
Can you get closer
inspector's
to the mic,
report.
Julie?
Building inspector's report that said the 2 loading docks were necessary, and then that June 28th, 2023 letter to Papa John family stated that only one was necessary. And your two reasons were, one, there were historic examples throughout the city, and I'm trying to quote because I rewatched this last night, historic examples throughout the city where there were multiple commercial uses within a single building that did not require a loading dock. And with respect to that answer, we asked you to please provide examples where there were commercial establishments that would have aggregated over 15,000 square feet, obviously, there was no loading dock required. And then secondly, you said that your reading of the code itself said that it was termed each retail or commercial or service establishment in excess of 15,000 square feet would require a loading dock. And since none of the ones proposed in the site plan would be over 15,000 square feet, that none would be required, which was the second basis for your answer. But then it was pointed out to you that the word each does not appear in the relevant section. And so that left you with the historic examples. Now we understand that you're unable to find any historic examples. Do you stand by that opinion? Does your department stand by that opinion? Does Mr. Burns stand by that opinion?
Yeah, his opinion is, good afternoon, everyone. His June 28th, 23, the letter stands. That's what he believed then. And I don't want to speak for Matt, but I believe that's where his position is.
That's still the same position that we stand by with the letter that was issued. Again, I did the research for the historic buildings. The examples just aren't there, and I made an assumption that the buildings were built in recognition. However, after looking through everything, these buildings transformed into what they are today.
So can I just clarify that if another, because there's a lot of commercial redevelopment going to be done in the city over the years. The city's certainly prime for it. If another commercial development like First Street Station was to be built, not with a hotel or anything, just a commercial development like First Street Station, you would no longer require a loading berth for that development. That's what I'm asking.
That's a great question, and
That's my number one concern. My number one concern is the precedent we're setting.
Yes.
I'm not picking on the Belhaven. I'm concerned about the code and the precedent. Yeah.
May I point something out?
Let me just, let's just
I
let him
would
finish answering.
I could help him.
I would like to think that if it's a commercial building and the totality of it requires a loading dock, that we might have to put one in there. However, I would have to see the application presented for me before I could say yes or no exactly on that direct question.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Appreciate the research you did too.
And I just want to make sure that the record reflects that your position stated in the June 28th, 2023 letter that one loading dock and only one loading dock is required, that it is based, that there is no historical evidence and no code provision on which you can rely to support the views expressed in that letter, which I believe is what we.
I would agree with that statement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me say something. Let's go exaggerate this for just a minute. Let's look at the Henlopen. Commissioner Davis, you're an owner there. Henlopen has 96 rooms, which is more rooms than this hotel is projected for. Henlopen also has 147 condominium units, which, each of the condominium units have 2 and 3 bedrooms. So basically, the Henlopen is 4 times the size of this building that we're talking about right now. Henlopen has 2 restaurants. This is possibly going to have 1, maybe 2, I don't know. But we're still problematic, and the fact is the Henlopen has a loading dock. That loading dock has been sealed forever. They now have 2 dumpsters sitting in front of the loading dock. That loading dock isn't used. When I talked to Dominic over at Grotto Pizza and his people, they didn't use that loading dock. That door doesn't come open for a long time. So to go ahead and punish the people that walk down Wilmington Avenue with a loading docks, it doesn't seem fair. I mean, one of the keys here is just to go ahead and try to say what's right for Rehoboth. And we're trying to make something nice here. This is where we are. I don't see any reason for a row of loading docks down there. It doesn't seem to be practical. I don't know if a single loading dock in Rehoboth is being used. But Henlopen's a prime example, and that's 4 times the size of this building, and it has a lot more usage. So let's look at the historic facts there. Thank you.
Mr. Dukes,
Yes.
I have lived next door to the Henlopen Hotel now.
Julie, microphone?
Sorry, is it even on?
Yes.
Okay. I have lived next door to the Henlopen Hotel for almost 15 years. The Henlopen Hotel, the last time I checked with it, which was this summer making reservations for some of my relatives to stay there, it had approximately 91 rooms. It has no restaurant at all. It has a venue on the top floor that can be rented for catering companies to come in and do wedding receptions, retirement parties, etc. There is no restaurant in that hotel, much less 2 that operate on a full-time basis. The hotel has no meeting room facilities, none whatsoever, no convention facilities, no bar, no, as I say, not 1 restaurant, much less 2. And it's got the same number of rooms, but what it doesn't have is so much as 1 square foot of commercial development in that commercial space in the hotel that's devoted to anything other than hotel use. And yes, there is a loading dock that was provided back, let's see, the hotel and the condominium building opened in the early 70s. That's over 50 years ago, and long
December
before
of
these.
1972.
Yes, 1972, before any of these zoning code provisions were adopted. But I'm sorry, but your facts are just absolutely incorrect.
Well, they had the Horizon Room there for years, and
Pardon
the
me?
bar downstairs.
Mr.
Yeah, it's historic,
Dukes,
but anyway,
is
these are the
this a
facts.
worthwhile conversation to talk about
No,
a building built in
I agree,
1972?
and the fact of the matter
Well,
is,
then
I'm
can we
just
move
trying-
on, please, sir? It's getting late.
Yes.
Thank you.
By the way, I don't appreciate your picking on the Henlopen Hotel. That gets it pretty personal. But if that's the way you want to play the game, that's fine.
Well, it's a fact.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, from a different perspective, which goes counter to perhaps some of the other members on the Planning Commission, I voiced it's an opinion based on science and risk analysis that notwithstanding the code, I think 1 loading dock is actually a safer approach, looking at the totality of what this is. Now, that's just my opinion based on science and risk science, that if it was 2 loading docks, it actually creates, as Mr. Zell, you pointed out, the ability for more trucks wheeling in and out and actually becoming more of a disruptive function. Now, whether or not, I don't know how that gets ultimately handled by us, but from the standpoint of this hotel at this location on a dead-end street and the amount of people that are, pedestrians are going to be traversing back and forth, 1 loading dock space is actually the safer alternative when doing it on a risk analysis basis and not the details of the code with other functions. I'll be quiet after that.
I agree with, I'm
I
sorry.
appreciate that. If I could just ask, I mean, as you have pointed out, Mike, on any number of times today with regard to some of your issues, we have a code. We don't have the power, the authority to say, oh, well, those planners sound like good ideas, but they're not code compliant. There is an agency in the city that exists for that purpose, to say, this is a code requirement, but you, applicant, have got good reasons to not comply with that particular one, whatever the reasons are, and so we exempt you from it. That option is there. If that option is granted, we are bound by it, but we do not have the authority to just blow off pieces of code that we individually might not like. And I think we are all, and I think Commissioner Stockdale was alluding to this earlier as well. That is one of the issues that I think all of us have. And as Commissioner Gay just said, we do not want, and I do not want, I can't speak, strike we, I do not want to create a precedent or appear to create a precedent in which other applicants think, well, the planning commission, they read the code applies, but, you know, whatever. You know, it doesn't sound something. So I just want to put that perspective, as you put your perspective into the record, I'll put mine
Well,
perspective
I think that's
as
a
well.
very good point, but I'm trying to remember how many years ago it was that we had a situation where the hotel, First Street Station,
Yeah.
what they needed to do to make it better looking, if they did it per the code, it would be the ugliest damn thing you ever saw. It was on the end of the hotel, and we said, that doesn't make any sense. And I can't remember if we wrote a letter or the chairman of the planning commission, we went in support with the applicant.
That was Avenue Inn.
About the Avenue
It
Inn,
was the
yeah,
Avenue Inn.
I'm
Yes,
sorry,
you
yeah, Avenue
absolutely
Inn.
did. Yep.
And the planning commission went, and we either wrote a letter, or the chair or the assistant chair went to the meeting in support. The fact that the planning commission was in support of issuing a variance, it blew right through in a matter of minutes. So if there are circumstances here that require that, which and I don't know this yet because we haven't done anything, but if in fact something were to come up, regardless of what it is, where there's joint agreement between the applicant and the planning commission, that it is in the best interest of the city, the CDP, the safety of the public, we might issue a letter or have a representative from the planning commission go with you to the Board of Adjustment. End of soliloquy.
So, where are we? Do we have any other
All right,
questions?
where are we next? Mr. Zell, do you have any response to that?
No, I mean, from our perspective, I mean, we'd like to get this approved. We think there's logic, and I looked at the code, and again, I don't vote. It's all up to you. That's why you're commissioners. But I do this a lot and in a lot of places, and to be honest with you, we've never had a situation where 100% of everything that is in the code actually, it just doesn't work that way. And we don't usually go to get variances. It just becomes logical for this project. You're not going to find another piece of property like this where this is to do this here. It's a unique thing. So we're kind of trying to take something that can be used everywhere and put it here. And I think that's why they tell commissioners they have the right, some of these things, I think you have a right to look at in a way that makes it work. That's all. And for everybody. But that's up to you. It's not up to me.
Before we leave that point, do you agree? One of my concerns with the loading bursts is, you know, I hear you talk, I hear people talk about this might not be the best thing to do for this hotel at this location.
Earl?
But I remain concerned about traffic and pedestrian safety, no matter what.
Good question.
And so I believe we have the ability to put conditions on you to ensure that that area is managed in a way that pedestrian safety and traffic is taken into account. You know, in other words, and I'm not saying this is the answer and I'm not proposing it, but I am saying, you know, provisions to make sure vehicles are not extending out into the street, they're not parked on the street, things like that.
Yeah, well, we've done this before. We actually, Scott and I actually did the building across from the Capitol Center in Washington, D.C., and they had 6 berths, 4 entry points. And by the way, when people go to see a concert, it's almost every night. So it's not like once a week. It's crazy. And what we put together, which may work here, I mean, it became a master loading dock agreement, which is that loading dock agreement says, here's what we have to do to manage the access, the hours, the trucks, blah, 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 blah. It's done with cameras. So if a retailer, they have to, it's basically a schedule, right? It's basically a schedule. And that's what he's going to be responsible for. And by the way, that makes it a better place, not only for safety, but if you're staying at this darn hotel, you're not going to see you know, a 46-foot truck come in at 5 o'clock when people are trying to get off the beach. We don't want that either. So I think it's a great idea, and I think if you condition it with a master loading dock agreement between the retailers and the hotel, the types of trucks and the timeframes, I'd be more, candidly, we're going to do it anyhow, whether you tell us or not. I'm just telling you that.
And were those agreements approved by the local municipality?
It was.
Okay.
It was. They basically said we needed it for safety. It was mostly generated for safety, candidly. They were really concerned of having 4 trucks show up. And if there are 10 that showed up and there are 6 dock berths, what happens to the other 4? They can't just be left on the street until the other ones pull out. You can't do that. So we made it the responsibility of where the loading docks were. And in this case, it would be the hotel's loading dock. So they would be responsible for generating schedules. And then if the retailers need them, like to fill the store, and I suspect the biggest use we're going to see is early, not early in time, but when we first open up. Everybody's got to stock their stores. The hotel's got to deliver furniture. All the stuff coming, that's going to be the tough one. And obviously, we'd like to schedule that way off season for a lot of reasons. So, but during normal flow, and to get a 5-star rating on this thing has got to run extremely well. And we're more than happy to put a master loading dock agreement together. And I think that is something that you can require us to do, which is, again, it's not written in your, whatever it is, in your code as what is plan commission, but what it does is it elevates the one dock position, a one dock with a master agreement that will eliminate traffic concerns, safety concerns, and deliverables. Now, I think he's going to say something about. I'll let him do it. But yeah, go ahead.
We've had these conversations. I'm not going to go through the analysis. I'm just going to observe that the building inspector believes only one loading dock is required based on his reading of the code. I believe that only one loading dock, that you care maybe what I think, but as an attorney who's been practicing a long time in Delaware, I believe that only one loading berth is required the way your code is written. Some may disagree. Some have said, no, I read it differently. But at best, all we have is a disagreement, a reasonable disagreement perhaps, but a disagreement about what the code means. And under Delaware law, if a code provision is susceptible of more than one meeting, the interpretation that favors the property owner is the one that gets applied. And so when I hear you talking about, oh, we can't do something that's contrary to the code, I don't agree with that, because one loading dock, in my view, in the building inspector's view, is not contrary to the code. One other thing I wanted to say about the, First Street Station project, none of us here are really familiar with all the history of that project, but it would not surprise me to discover that there's a loading dock there because they wanted to have the flexibility to have a store at least 15,000 square feet in size. But I don't know. But I know we will never have one that exceeds 15,000 square feet in size, because if we did, we'd need a second loading dock, and we don't have a second loading dock.
So will your team, I'm not sure who to address this to, Mr. Zell, will you agree to have one of those instruments?
Yeah, we'll
entered
put a
into?
master loading dock agreement. I think we're going to do it anyhow.
Okay.
Whether you tell me to do it, we're going to have one. This is a legal thing that he's dealing. I'm telling you, practical, operationally, we can't run this without it.
Okay.
And that gentleman, he's shaking his head. He's going to have to know who comes and goes. We got to coordinate. This is going to be a major flag with people paying lots of money, and it's got to look good. And it's all coming out of one side of this building. So we have to be really on it to make this work, and we will do that.
Mr. Sal, I have no doubt but what you and the potential hotel management will do everything you can to control traffic. But we have a city sponsored traffic study done by the Rossi Group that identified the traffic and pedestrian problems with freight deliveries in the city.
Yep.
We have the owner of Go Fish next door, who's written a letter that I assume will be in the record, and Ms. Womack circulated it this morning, that once again talks in terms of the the facts of the multiple loading dock or delivery trucks accumulating on Rehoboth Avenue for the commercial businesses that are there now.
Right.
And nobody has demonstrated, as far as I know, that the total commercial space that is within the Belhaven property isn't more than 15,000 square feet. But I just want to say, I live in D.C., well, it's in Maryland, in a large condominium building that has 145 units. No restaurants, no bars, no commercial space, no nothing. But we have 2 loading docks in that building. We have condominium rules and regulations. We even have an employee that we pay to be our loading dock master who has an office right where the loading docks are. And we do everything we can to control the comings and goings of all of those big delivery trucks, in this case moving vans, but it's the same principle. They come when they come. We have schedules that people have to fill out. They have to notify us a week in advance if they're coming. We have everything controlled from the perspective of the condominium and the condominium board and our rules and regulations. But I promise you, the delivery trucks come and they pay no attention whatsoever, and then they sit there and then they block traffic, and that is exactly what could happen here with just one loading dock. And with all the best of intentions, all the agreements you all could draft, operationally, they will come when they come, and a second loading dock would relieve that pressure of all those delivery trucks at the top of Rehoboth Avenue and the top of Wilmington Avenue.
I disagree with you completely, because having 2 will just make it worse. I mean, candidly speaking, first of all, a condominium is not a commercial hotel. We have to charge a lot of money. There's only one master. When you have look, I represent co-ops, condos. I build them. I'm going to New York on Sunday, one a big one. Everybody, as an owner, all of a sudden has a vested interest in saying what they want. This is a commercial operation. The hotel wins, because that's the key. If the people don't show up when we tell them to do it, he's going to find a different provider. It'll be that simple. Because we can't afford to have this go awry, not only for that, but the services of the hotel, number one. Number 2, we can always replace him too if he doesn't do it correctly. That's the other aspect to it. And all kidding aside, he's got to enforce this stuff. But we're going to allow the retailers, if they do need it, we're going to schedule them into that dock as well to lessen some of that traffic that you may be seeing right now in front of these stores. Because right now, they don't have an option. It's happening because that's all they got. We're actually adding the ability to use that. And when we do the deals for that space, we're going to offer that as an option for them to utilize. But again, they got to schedule it through Jim, through his company, to get access for deliveries. Does that mean Federal Express can't park a truck and throw a box in front of the store? That does happen without a control. But the good news here is very rarely do we get FedEx deliveries. Only if somebody's holding some sort of event or something here, they'll drop off boxes. But typically, all the stuff that we get comes in basically on limited truck deliveries that are scheduled. We're going to get into a rhythm here. This is not just a one-off, and we're not moving people in or out. This is the scheduled food, the scheduled linens, the scheduled sheets, and any of the goods and cleaning products, and those are scheduled, and they're continuous. We're not moving people in or out. That's not what we're doing here. So I think one dock under a master agreement, under control of the hotel, it takes it to what I'll call loading dock +1. It gives you that extra piece. And we're more than happy to provide a master loading dock agreement. And candidly, as I said, whether you tell me to do it or not as a condition, I'm doing it anyhow.
All right, sir.
City are required of everybody.
Yes. Yes. Ms. Stewart.
So, in the beginning, when we were talking toilets,
Toilets, okay.
you said people may take, who knows, we don't know, where you need a toilet, people might take 2, 3 bays.
2.
Regarding how many of these units of commercial space.
Right,
one entity might
right,
take.
right.
Well, I mean, that's part of the point.
Yeah, but none of them will be, my guess, and to answer you,
Okay.
we're not getting anywhere close to 14,000 feet. First of all, they can't afford it. Okay, economics, taking a 15,000 bay on the boardwalk, that's a lot of money. Most of these, in fact, there's, I don't know, Chip was here, the ice cream. We're asking the people that are there first to come back. And it'll be a new space, but we don't want to change the flavor of the delivery of the ice cream and Candy Kitchen and all that. We're going to hope to come back. They're the first people we're talking to. We're not running out here to put in, something, that is foreign to this area. That's not the intent. So, but most of those people take 2 bays, 3 bays at most. I mean, Grotto is the only one that seems to take a lot. He's going to sell a lot of pizza. But Grotto's got so many locations around here. He's the only one I don't know if he'll come back because I think he has other alternatives, his own stuff, right? So, but we're trying. I think most of these will be 2 bays, maybe 3 at most. So you're talking 3,000, 4,000 feet, and there'll be some that'll be less. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, and they pay more rent actually.
I'm surprised to hear you talking about it in terms of bays, because we saw the drawings and they're not, they're already kind of designated. So I didn't know until today that those are just kind of,
it's just
suggestions.
It's suggestions, yes. I mean, you have to draw something, right? I mean, we have to show what we're trying to do, and we don't know if it's going to be food or not food, right? That's a restaurant. No, if it's a restaurant, I think we got to come back to you anyhow, right? Because that's a whole other thing, and it's going to change. I mean, so that's where we are. But I just don't see us getting close, because I just don't. Again, the financial aspect of it is going to be expensive.
Yeah.
It's just going to be very costly. So, and we really want to do this. So, I'm excited about this, and I think we're getting it darn close. And I hope you guys approve it, and hope the commissioners approve it. It'd be great. So,
If you are done with your comments,
I'm
we'll
done.
we'll get closer.
good. Then let me get, on that note, I'm leaving.
Does anyone else have
Is
any
everybody
questions?
else? I was going to say before I step.
Okay. Yes. Richard, a document issue, making the record.
So just a couple, since we're here now, let's just do it now rather than tomorrow, because I think tomorrow's going to, I don't know how long tomorrow's going to take. So there may be some public comments. So this will hopefully just take a couple minutes just for the record. So Mr. Forson, I believe you have submitted something on the record identifying which documents the applicant would like to confirm to me be part of the record, and that your letter with all the attachments are in fact part of the record itself. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. Yes, that is correct. Thank you.
And then with respect to...
And that was at the chair's request. So we submitted what I hope is a comprehensive package of everything.
And then to add to that, what you're going to present here today in photographs.
Yeah, and I will come back tomorrow at the very beginning with labels for where those photos were taken.
Okay.
Then with regard to the site plan that the applicant wishes this body to, review and vote on tomorrow, just want to make sure that the record is clear. As I understand it, the sealed survey from Bowler is dated January 2024. Is that correct?
Yes, it's what I emailed you last night is the final version. It's signed, it's sealed.
Okay, and that has been supplemented by Mr. Falat's drawings of May 10, 2024. Is that correct, that those two documents together, in essence, are the plan that you would like this body to review and vote on?
Correct.
Okay.
I do think to the extent tomorrow you want to make suggestions or to us on particular details on the plan. I mean, we talked a long time about the spire, for example. I'd like to see it. You may not. We can make those adjustments as part of your deliberation.
Right, I understand that, but I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement what the baseline is.
Yes.
Okay. And then just very briefly, there are some additional documents that the Planning Commission wants to make sure are part of the record, so I'll just state, and you can look at I can confirm in an email to you as well. I don't know whether you had made this, but there's a January 24, 2022 Board of Adjustment decision or notice of decision regarding the 3.0 FAR.
That was attached to my letter,
That
yes.
is attached, okay, fine, we're in agreement there.
I also attached the Grotto's Board of Adjustment decision.
Just in general, all of the reports over time, over the course of this long process that have been submitted by the building inspector or the planner, I'm not going to get into all the specifics, but we're going to incorporate all of that, but including specifically the joint report of the building inspector in Wallace Montgomery dated March 12, 2024 will be part of the record.
Yes, I don't know that I attached all of the reports, but
That's fine.
I agree.
And then there is some correspondence between the Planning Commission, either directly or through me, and the applicant and its agents. All of that will be also part of the record, including specifically a February 2020, long day, February 23, 2023 letter from the Planning Commission Chair to Mr. Papajohn, a March 8, 2023 letter from the Planning Chair to Mr. Papajohn. I don't know whether, you may have included this already, so if I'm being redundant, I apologize, but there's an April 17, 2023 letter from the Office of State Fire Marshal to Mr. Falat. And then there's an April, which you sent to me last night, April 4, 2023 letter from Mr. Falat to the Fire Marshal. And then I think there's also been reference, and again, if I'm repeating what you've already included, I apologize, but there's been reference today to a June 28, 2023 letter from Mr. Janis to Mr. Papajohn.
Yes, all those, some of those I included. The letter from Mr. Falat to the fire marshal we didn't include just because that was the letter requesting the letter we got from the fire marshal, but that's fine, it can be part of the record too.
All right, thank you. Is anyone here from the public to speak? Yes, sir. State your name, please, sir.
My name is not Howard Rourke. I was here Monday, and I introduced myself for about 3 minutes. My name is actually Mark Marterwald. As I said, I spent my whole 3 minutes just explaining my educational, licensing, certificates, background of who I was. Took the whole 3 minutes, and I didn't even finish. So today I'll let you know that in addition to everything I said on Monday.
Sir, we didn't meet on Monday.
The city commissioners met.
We're not the city commissioners.
I realize that.
Okay.
Okay, so I spent the whole 3 minutes introducing myself on Monday. But what I left out was that in addition to everything I said on Monday, I have a DOT license, a commercial driver's license, the ultimate commercial license. I can drive tractor trailers, I can drive doubles, I can drive triples, I can drive tank cars, I can drive hazardous liquids, explosives, whatever. I got the ultimate DOT driver's license, every possible endorsements, and absolutely no restrictions. In addition to that DOT license, I have I have one FAA license as a single engine pilot's license. I taught myself how to fly. Did it my freshman year of college while I was going to college. I have 2 FCC licenses. For 55 years, well, 55 years ago, I acquired an FCC technician's license. And from what I've heard here today, whether it deals with transportation, electronics, communications, I gotta say, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one important point. I also heard somebody up here, heard everything you said, but one thing struck me in particular. Somebody mentioned an Achilles heel. And that's pretty funny, because this hotel is being built by Greeks. Greeks who have given us the greatest architecture we have. Half of our language comes from Greek or Latin derivatives. I think he should let these people build the hotel the way they want to, even the way they wanted to. I don't like the way you've pulled this hotel down, but whatever they want to do, I think they should do it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Mr. Perry.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to make this very short because I know it's running late.
Oh, I'm disappointed.
Really? Do you have to make those kinds of comments about? That's disrespectful. I'm sorry. As you're hopefully moving into making a decision tomorrow, I'd like you to remember one thing. I don't believe that there's anywhere in the code that requires 2 loading berths. You are coming to that conclusion based on an interpretation, not what the code says, but an interpretation of whether or not those less than 15,000 square foot commercial locations should be counted as one and all added together. It's not a code provision, that's an interpretation. So 2 berths are not required by the code. And Mike, with all due respect, and I do respect you, the same thing applies to the antenna and the sheathing. The sheathing definition says it can be X or Y or Z. Doesn't have to be all of those, or it leaves it up to the individual to decide how they want to treat it. And I just want to remind you that the CDP recommends or suggests that on a going forward basis that the city be more flexible when looking at matters in terms of its regulations, the code provisions, and how they determine matters for applicants. Please don't forget what the CDP has recommended to you, or that you recommended in the CDP. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd note that there is a letter, I think came in maybe this morning, from Allison Blythe at Go Fish. And I assume, Ann, will that be made part of the record? Okay. Does anyone have anything else?
You're convened tomorrow at 2, right?
We're back here tomorrow at 2, yes. Okay. We started at 11 this morning. So we are adjourned, and I will see you tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.